Chapter 881. Other than Yu Mian, Wang Si, and Feng Liang, who held authority in certain areas, those who were qualified to participate in this meeting were the backbone of some divisions and regiments. Seeing that a big battle was about to be fought and the time to gain merit had arrived, it would be strange if they didn't like someone who suddenly wanted to take a share of the loot. All the officers were talking at once. Yang Chendong smiled but didn't say anything. He only held his tea and slowly drank it. His gaze would occasionally look at the faces of the other officers, observing their every move. Among these people, there was one person who had a very special status. He was Fan Yuhai's former subordinate, Lu Duo. In the battle, Fan Yuhai and Zhang Meng had both died, leaving only Lu Duo behind. It had to be said that this person was also a staunch person. He tried to commit suicide several times, but was always found and saved under the special protection of the mercenaries. After this matter was reported to Yang Chendong, the two of them had a long talk. Lu Duo, I know you hate me and don't want to serve in the mercenary army, but I think you must be more curious about why Fan Yuhai lost to me. I'll give you a chance now. You cannot be considered a mercenary, but some meetings allow people to participate. You can watch all of this as a third party and find your answer. If one day you find your answer and still want to seek death, then I won't stop you. How about it? After this conversation, Lu Duo appeared in this meeting with a transcendent status. He had seen everyone's performance just now. When he heard that someone wanted to gain merit, although he didn't say anything, he agreed in his heart. Since the battle was imminent and the military merits were in front of him, why would he let others do it? This was equivalent to snatching meat from his bowl. If he was a regiment commander or even a division commander, he would definitely oppose it. Not only did he think this way, but he also thought that Yang Chendong also had the same thoughts. He even guessed why this person would bring up this matter. He must be using this to tell everyone that there were many troops who wanted to participate in the battle. If they didn't perform well on the battlefield, then they couldn't blame others for snatching their merits. This was just a way to motivate the generals and soldiers. In the past, Fan Yuhai had often used it, so it was not surprising. Lu Duo also did not think that Yang Chendong would be more skilled in this aspect, much better than his former master. In the meeting, the generals were still talking at the same time. However, all of them expressed that it was enough to have them on the battlefield. As for the 20,000 Mongol soldiers, they should just forget about it. The benefits should not be given to outsiders, right? After a while, those who should have expressed their opinions had all expressed their opinions. Even the Tatar division commander, Su He, who rarely spoke, firmly said that they could fight this battle well. If they didn't have enough troops, they could use the logistics division's troops. There was no need for others to interfere. Soon, apart from Commander Tiger's Mane and Deputy Commander Shi Bi, the rest of the officers made their statements. Everyone is almost done talking. Why aren't Commander Hu and Deputy Commander Shi speaking? What do you think? Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the abilities of these two people. As they continued to grow, they had become more and more like high-ranking generals. They were not anxious when faced with problems, and they were calm and mature. The two people who were called looked at each other first. Then, Tiger's Mane, as the representative, smiled and said, "Young master, since you said so, you must have thought about the overall situation. We will listen to you." Good. Yang Chendong nodded heavily. Then, he looked at the audience and said, "I mean that we can agree to their request and allow them to send 20,000 people to participate in the battle." Sixth young master. Hearing Yang Chendong's decision, the officers all said with ugly expressions. Even Lu Duo, who was not wearing a military uniform and did not have any military rank, widened his eyes at this moment. He suddenly realized that he still didn't understand this loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. Yang Chendong gestured for everyone to not be anxious. Then, he said, "I understand what you mean and what you think. However, there is only one thing I want to say. That is, people will die in war. Although both sides are flesh and blood, the mercenaries are like my children. Of course, I will side with you. If we win this battle with too many casualties, that is not what I want. since they have joined the mercenary group, that in itself is a kind of trust in us. Trust is easy to say, but it can only be barely achieved after countless efforts. Since they trust us, we should be responsible for their lives. If we can avoid death, we should avoid death. If we can avoid death, we should avoid death. Therefore, the addition of these 20,000 people will greatly reduce the pressure on us. In some bloody battles, we can even let them fight. This can reduce our casualties to a minimum, and it can also tell others that it is not so easy to take advantage of us. What do you all think? Allowing others to participate in the battle did mean that they had to share a part of the military merits. However, it was undeniable that they would also share a part of the danger. If the plan was meticulous, they might even share a large part of the danger. This was Yang Qindong's consideration for everyone. When these words were said in public, the people who had objected just now could not help but shut their mouths. This was for their own good. They could not refuse. When everyone looked at Yang Qindong, their eyes were filled with gratitude. Lu Duo finally understood Yang Qindong's meaning. He sighed in his heart. This person was indeed ruthless. Compared to him, Fan Yuhai was not as good. However, from another point of view, was his consideration wrong? This time, the people of the Mongol tribe in the desert wanted to take advantage of them. If they refused, it was inevitable that people would say that they were not impartial. However, they originally wanted to force Yang Qindong to give in. In the end, they were used. Who could be blamed for this? Of course, what made Lu Duo sigh was that Yang Qindong valued the lives of the soldiers. How could this kind of leader who sincerely thought for the soldiers not be respected? What if he could not be supported by others? When he looked at Yang Qindong, Lu Duo seemed to see a faint halo above his head. That was something that only people who achieved great things would have. In comparison, whether it was the angle of looking at the problem or the situation, Fan Yuhai lost by more than a level. Now, it seemed that they would lose and Yang Qindong would win. Everything seemed to be within reason. The meeting was still going on. In the end, 3 sets of plans were drawn up. Because they still didn't know how the Tatar cavalry was going to fight this battle, the plans could be changed at any time. However, it was undeniable that all the participants were convinced after listening to Yang Qindong's 3 sets of plans. The various calculations were in place and were made according to the character of the enemy's generals. It already included all kinds of possibilities. Military preparations had to be done. The matter of Yang Qindong marrying Princess Tuoya and conferring the title of Khan still had to be carried out. This matter was mainly handed over to Yu Mian, Wang Si, and the others to handle. According to the requirements, this ceremony had to be grand and had to have the effect of encouraging and unifying the people. The 1st of July quickly arrived under everyone's expectations. In the morning of this day, the entire first city was infected by the enthusiastic atmosphere. All the people in the city, regardless of age, walked to the streets and came to the largest central square in the city. There was also such a square in Qiqian City. It could accommodate more than 300,000 people and the army. It had already become a kind of landmark building in Yangxia City. Princess Tuoya was already dressed up. She was wearing gold and silver accessories. It was estimated that the weight of these accessories was no less than 10 kilograms. It was so heavy that she felt like she could not lift her head. With the help of her maid Guna, after Fan Yuchi was defeated, Guna who was imprisoned was freed, she came to an extremely luxurious carriage. Then, she rushed to the central square with Yang Qindong, who was wearing a marshal's uniform. 2nd Madam Qiao Yin, 4th Madam Lady Xiang, and 7th Madam Yang Nai had already arrived at the square. According to the 2 madams, they did not want to show their faces in public at this time. The main reason was that they did not want to steal the limelight from the 7th madam. However, Yang Qindong insisted that they come. He also used this matter to tell others that he would not forget his old love after marrying a new one. Similarly, when it came to military matters, he wouldn't forget about the old just because he used new people. At this moment, the square was already crowded. When Yang Qindong's carriage appeared, the square was even more jubilant. The sound of shouting the heavenly Khan shook the sky. It could be heard clearly in every corner of the first city. The carriage stopped. Yang Chendong appeared in the crowd's line of sight, holding the hand of Tuoya, who was dressed in splendid clothes. He waved to everyone from time to time. For a moment, the waves of cheers were louder than the previous. At this moment, everyone was immersed in the warm atmosphere. Among the crowd, the spies of the Security Bureau were dispatched collectively. They appeared in the crowd and watched every place in the square at all times to ensure that they could counterattack immediately if there was any movement. Amidst the cheers of more than 200,000 people, Yang Chendong walked up to the viewing platform of the square. As he made a gesture, a loud bugle sounded, followed by a grand military parade. Groups of mercenaries in military green uniforms walked out from the side of the square and strode forward on the road in front of the square. During the war, one of the best ways to announce oneself was to parade. It could not only have the effect of inspiring and grand, but it could also have the effect of deterring the enemy. Sure enough, when the military parade began, the square was much quieter. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the mercenaries walking through the square. Even Wan Shan, Ning Wenfeng, and the others were staring at the scene in front of them, as if they were going to miss every single moment. The first to appear was the Black Cavalry Guards. The uniform black armor, black mask, and the uniform warhorse armor gave everyone a strong sense of oppression when they appeared. Although there were only 100 people in total, the aura they revealed was not weaker than any army with thousands of men and horses. Chapter 882. The second person to walk over was the new army headquarters. Tiger's Mane, who was dressed in a general's uniform, led the way. The deputy commander and other military personnel followed behind him. Their appearance caused a burst of cheers in the square. After the military, the first group to appear was the Tatar division. After the expansion, they had 20 battalions. They appeared in formal attire and attracted a lot of shouts from the central square. The next group to appear was the recruit division. They received the most cheers because many of their relatives were the people of the origin city. With the help of their relatives, their momentum was naturally great. After the recruit division was the independent division. The division commander Xian Honghai and the deputy division commander Na Ri Song walked in front of the group. As the division commander, Xian Honghai had no chance to fight with Tua Buhua. Even if he came to attend the wedding ceremony this time, he still had to go back soon. In contrast, Na Ri Song was much more fortunate. He was lucky enough to stay and be the representative general of the Mongolian tribe in the north of the desert. He would fight the Tatar army together with the mercenaries. Their appearance attracted Yang Chendong and Tuoya, who were on the viewing platform, to wave at them. The fourth division to appear was the logistics group. They had too many people and it was impossible for all of them to appear. They only sent a part of the representatives, but they also won a lot of cheers. Especially when the propaganda group and the medical group walked through the square, it attracted a lot of attention from the Mongolian men. These two groups were mostly made up of female soldiers. Under the contrast of the military uniforms, it was the first time that the berets appeared in front of everyone. It was impossible for such a group to not attract attention. Especially the medical group, they were responsible for battlefield rescue. They were far from the propaganda group. Although the members were very beautiful, they could only be seen from afar. It was very difficult to get close to them. The medical group was different. They were responsible for treating the soldiers and the wounded on the battlefield. It was very easy to get close to them as long as they were sick. Because of this, many soldiers recently went to the medical group for various reasons. However, in reality, no one knew how many people were really sick. After the logistics group, the direct subordinate regiment, reconnaissance battalion, light cavalry regiment, heavy cavalry regiment and other regimental units appeared. However, the most eye-catching unit was still the heavy cavalry unit. Although there were only 2,000 of them, their auras were extraordinary. When they walked on the square, they caused the ground to tremble. Their shining blades caused many Mongolian girls to scream, and the Mongolian men to feel their blood boil. In their eyes, these were the strongest existences. If they could join such a group, they would be proud for the rest of their lives. After these troops walked in, the next to enter was the 20,000 cavalry of the Mongol tribe. In comparison, regardless of whether it was military discipline, or imposing manner, they were all a bit weaker. Fortunately, Princess Tuoya was waving her hands at them from the viewing platform, giving them support. Only then did they not lose so much face. These 20,000 men were the 20,000 that the Mongol tribes had requested to join the battle. Originally, they had thought that they were here to split the benefits and show their faces. However, it seemed like their appearance had caused the atmosphere to become a little awkward. But no matter what, the fact that they were able to appear here was already a victory. They originally thought that the war god might not agree to them coming out to take advantage of the situation. However, they did not expect that the war god would agree so quickly. This allowed them to feel the war god's friendly attitude, and they were determined to perform well on the battlefield. After the Mongol tribe walked in, the last to enter was the ferocious tiger regiment. Different from the cavalry, this time they walked in. All of them carried the Type 95 on their shoulders and were equipped with shining blades, making it difficult for them not to attract attention. However, what was even more unexpected was that when the 3,200 men walked in front of the viewing platform, the leader, Xiao Feng, suddenly shouted, "Look to the right." With this order, the ferocious tiger regiment soldiers who were walking in unison suddenly changed their pace. Then, they raised their spears and stabbed. Their movements were neat and uniform. Under the sunlight, the shining bayonets drew a beautiful arc in front of the 200,000 plus spectators. This was a standard military parade, and only the real Leng Feng could perform this standard action. It was a pity that there was no military song to accompany it. However, the appearance of the Leng Feng ferocious tiger regiment still stirred up the atmosphere of the entire plaza. Especially when they walked behind the 20,000 Mongol tribe cavalry. Compared to their laziness, the appearance of this neat group of soldiers stood out even more. The military parade lasted for nearly 6 hours, from morning to afternoon. As the ferocious tiger regiment marched out of the square, a few large balloons suddenly appeared in the sky. Countless flowers that had been prepared beforehand scattered down from the sky, giving people the feeling that divine flowers had descended from the heavens, or that fairies were scattering flowers. On the viewing platform, Tuoya was extremely excited. She hugged Yang Chendong's arm tightly and looked up at the sky in surprise. Yang Chendong's lips were constantly curved in a smile. Behind him, second Madame Qiao Yin and fourth Madame Xiang also had looks of envy on their faces. However, they knew that this marriage had great political significance. It was not something they could be envious of. Moreover, as long as their husband treated them well, the two of them would be very satisfied. When the commoners in the plaza saw the heavenly flowers, they were all excited. Many old men knelt on the ground as their knees gave way. Then, they shouted, "Long live the heavenly Khan, long live the heavenly Khan! Long live the Khan! Long live the Khan!" Very quickly, this chant spread to the entire plaza. The 200,000 plus commoners and the tens of thousands of soldiers in the parade all knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, expressing their excitement at this moment. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng watched this scene from the side of the viewing platform, their eyes flashing with deep worry. However, when they saw everyone kneeling on the ground, even the leaders of the Mongol tribes had no choice but to kneel on the ground and chant the slogan. The two of them standing there were extremely eye-catching. Squat down. At the critical moment, Shi Wanshan reacted quickly. He was Bai Ming's minister, so naturally, he could not easily kneel to others. However, at this time, squatting was still possible. In this way, although they were somewhat unwilling, the two of them still squatted in the crowd. Although their knees did not touch the ground, on the surface, there was no difference between them and the crowd. And this scene was captured by two students from the First City Academy who were good at photography. They had received the digital camera the day before yesterday. The two of them were amazed by this good thing that could completely freeze the image taken with a press of a button. No one knew where this thing came from, but it seemed that there were too many secrets that happened to the sixth young master. There were so many secrets that if he took out a plane that could fly now, everyone would not be too surprised other than exclaiming in admiration. In the crowd's loud cheers for the Khan, Yang Chendong and Tuoya walked down the viewing platform and went straight to the Yang mansion. The next thing to do was to hold a banquet. In the courtyard of the Yang mansion, there were already 10 tables of wine. Of course, this was for the high-level personnel. As for the others, they would be accompanied by other officials in the city lord's mansion, the first city guest house, and other places. A lively day would always come to an end. That night, all the guests walked out of the Yang mansion in satisfaction when they were drunk. Yang Chendong, who was still full of energy, also strode into his bridal chamber. There, Princess Tuoya was waiting for him, waiting for the happiest moment of his life to come. On the second day of the wedding ceremony, the guests began to leave one after another, and the parade troops also went to the front line one after another. They originally had their own missions, and if one looked carefully, they would notice that some of the troops that left the city were mainly heading toward the Saihan mountain area, which was southeast of the first city. Just yesterday, before the ceremony was about to begin, the Security Bureau and the reconnaissance team, which was under Su Yunqing's command, sent news that the 20,000 cavalrymen under the Tatar army's right vanguard, Lakshan, had arrived at the foot of Saihan mountain. They revealed that they wanted to capture this mountain and use it as their rear base to confront the mercenaries. According to the previous plan, the logistics division had originally sent out 6 battalions of more than 2,000 people to guard Saihan mountain. However, because they had entered the city to participate in the parade, only 1 battalion was left to guard the mountain. Coincidentally, at this moment, the Tatar army appeared at the foot of the mountain. The troops that were leaving the city were rushing to support them. On the magnetite slope halfway up Saihan mountain, General Lakshan was looking up at the peak of the mountain with a complacent expression. After receiving the order from Great Khan Tuachuo Buhua to attack the first city, Lakshan rushed all the way here. He wanted to arrive before the great Ming Dynasty's Zhongdan Duke's wedding and sabotage it. However, he was still late by a day. The enemies that obstructed them along the way were really troublesome, making it impossible for them to arrive at the first city on time. But it didn't matter. The Tatar spies left behind in this area brought him good news. There weren't many enemies in Mount Saihan that the mercenaries had taken down. There were only a few hundred of them even if they were to take all of them into account. 20,000 versus a few hundred. This was an unequal battle. To Lakshan, it was like an appetizer before a big meal. He did not care about it at all. The facts also proved that the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain was taken down without much attack. Next, they only had to wait until they reached the peak of Saihan mountain. Then, this place would be completely under their control. Report. A large number of mercenary reinforcements had been discovered at the foot of the mountain. When the news reached Lakshan's ears, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Good, they're pretty fast. Since this is the case, let's work together from the inside and the outside. Inform everyone not to rush to attack the mountain. Let the troops come up and immediately send someone to inform General Hubo, to quickly move down the mountain. We need to work together from the inside and the outside to take down this wave of enemies. Chapter 883. The scout nodded and immediately went to pass down the order. Another deputy general, Mu Chi, came up with a puzzled expression. General, why should we stop attacking the mountain? The enemy is here, so we should attack with all our might. There are people on the mountain, and we are now halfway up the mountain. This is very disadvantageous for us. Ha ha ha, what do you know? Lakshan had a smug look on his face when he said this. Mu Chi flattered and laughed. He took half a step forward and said, General, please enlighten us so that we can learn from you. Looking at Mu Chi's curious face, Lakshan's vanity was greatly satisfied. He laughed and said, all right, seeing that you are so eager to learn, I will teach you a lesson today. Let me ask you, why did the mercenaries rush to our Saihan mountain so early in the morning? Well, it's probably because they know that there are mercenaries surrounded here, so they want to take this place back. Mu Chi answered with a straight to the point. That's right. Then if we had already taken over the entire mountain, do you think they would still want to take it back? Lakshan chuckled and patted Mu Chi's shoulder. Let me tell you, war is a skill. Sometimes, bravery alone is not enough. There are still many things to learn. Lakshan had already left, but Mu Chi was still deep in thought. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and shouted, "Ah! I know, the general intentionally left the mountain unattacked in order to lure the enemy's reinforcements. Only if there are mercenaries here would they have no choice but to come despite knowing the danger. That's right, the enemy on the mountain is the bait we use to catch the big fish. If we eat them now, the mercenaries won't fall for it. Ha ha ha. Now, we just have to wait for them to reach the foot of the mountain and wait for General Hubo, to surround them. Then, we can eat the bait at any time and attack from both inside and outside to deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries." Lakshan, who was already a few meters away, laughed heartily and walked further and further away. He wanted to see how many reinforcements the mercenaries had. If there were too few, it wouldn't be enough for him to eat. At this moment, Hubo's 20,000 soldiers were rushing over from the west of Saihan Mountain. Hubo, who was riding on a horse, asked General Mu Ren as she galloped. Did Lakshan really take down Mount Saihan? Yes, the scouts they sent, as well as the gerfalcons in the sky, told us the same thing. Mu Ren answered with certainty. Then are you sure that there's only one battalion of mercenaries on Saihan Mountain? Hubo, asked worriedly. I saw it clearly. Usually, there are only 4 battalions on the mountain. Our brothers went to investigate before. This time, for the wedding of Duke Zhongdan, they sent 3 battalions to participate in the military parade. Now there is only 1 battalion left in the mountain. Mu Ren nodded again and said, "This Mount Saihan is such an important place. How could it change hands so easily? General Mu Ren, do you think this is another one of Duke Zhongdan's schemes?" Hubo, was still worried and continued to ask. That shouldn't be the case. Our men just sent a report from the origin city. They said that Duke Zhongdan's main generals appeared during the military parade. If they were really prepared, then there should be at least 1 general guarding an important place like Mount Saihan. Mu Ren replied while sighing in his heart. It seemed that his general was scared after the previous defeat. Otherwise, why would he be so careful? Is that so? That's good, that's good. After asking a few questions and not finding any problems, Hubo finally relaxed. She then said to a guard beside her, "Go and inform General Hu Lin of the vanguard. Tell him to speed up. As long as we report to him, even if the mercenaries have some tricks up their sleeves, it won't be that easy for them to take down our army of 40,000. Hubo was very careful. As the saying goes, once bitten by a snake, twice shy. This was exactly what he meant. He was worried that Yang Chendong would play tricks again, so he wanted to be closer to Lakshan. That way, if the situation changed, he would be able to provide assistance. However, he did not know that this was exactly what his opponent did not want to see. On the battlefield, only by not letting the opponent feel comfortable would one feel comfortable. This was a principle that had not changed since the ancient times. As such, when Hubo's troops wanted to get closer to Mount Saihan, they encountered more and more resistance. There were a total of 10,000 Mongol soldiers in this region. The vanguard general Hu Lin had already encountered many waves of enemies, ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand. Fortunately, the other party's combat strength was very ordinary, and most of the time, they used arrows to attack from afar. Once he became serious and launched a charge, the other party would retreat again, as if they had no intention of tangling with them. It was also as if their combat strength was mediocre, and it was difficult for them to be a match. This situation was somewhat abnormal, so Hu Lin sent someone to report the situation to General Hubo. Very quickly, he received a confirmation. Don't worry about them. They just want to stop us from meeting up with General Lakshan. The more they do this, the faster we need to get to the foot of Mount Saihan. With this order, Hu Lin calmed down and ordered the vanguard to charge forward. When they met with obstructions, they would only send out a small group of cavalry to retaliate. As expected, even a small group of cavalry was able to repel the enemies. Hence, they continued to charge forward. When the sky was about to turn dark, they were already 20 li west of the foot of Mount Saihan. From here to the foot of the mountain, it would only take an hour. The cavalry had been running for an entire day and were truly tired. After asking for instructions, Hu Lin ordered the troops to rest. In less than an hour, General Hu Bo, and General Mu Ren arrived, and both sides met up. Good, everyone is tired. Have a good rest. Tomorrow morning, we will coordinate with General Lakshan to attack the mercenaries. We will have to trouble General Mu Ren to keep watch tonight. Hu Bo, called all the generals over, and after a series of praises, he gave the order. Hu Bo's troops on the left had already reached the foot of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, they could even see the white torches in their camp. This made Lakshan, who was guarding the mountain, calm down. Now that the situation had been formed, they only had to wait until the next morning to completely wipe out the 400 mercenaries guarding the mountain. Then, they would be able to launch an attack from the inside and deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries at the foot of the mountain. What undefeatable mercenaries! What dogs hit war gods! I think they are just so. Lakshan laughed heartily, and under the praises of Mu Qi and the other generals, he returned to his tent to rest. Right now, he was just waiting for the moment he woke up to launch his counterattack. He wanted the world to see that the Ming Dynasty's loyal and courageous people were not the only ones who knew how to fight. At the foot of the mountain, in the mercenary tent, Na Raizong was harshly scolding the small leaders of the Mongol tribes. What the hell are you guys doing? You said that you wanted to stop Hu Bo's troops, to prevent them from reaching the foot of the mountain so quickly. Now, they are just 20 li away from us, and we are about to be pincered from both sides. How do we explain this? Facing Na Raizong's scouts, the small leaders lowered their heads and did not speak. This was something that could not be helped. Originally, they had thought that they could just follow behind the mercenaries and take advantage of the situation. On the other hand, it was not suitable for them to deal with the 20,000 Tatar cavalry. In truth, they could not do it anyway. A bunch of useless things. Because of your mistakes, we can only wait for tomorrow's bitter battle. When the time comes, no one is to call for retreat. This was all because of our poor progress. Na Raizong continued to roar in anger. All right, everyone has done their best. Hu Bo brought 20,000 cavalrymen. How could they be so easy to deal with? Everyone, go and rest. There will be a bitter battle tomorrow. How can we not rest well? The deputy commander of the new army said like a good old man. Then, he sent those leaders out of the main tent with a smile on his face. After they left, Tiger's man stood up and said to Na Raizong, "How was it?" It's not that I didn't give them a chance, but that they did not know how to grasp it. What happens next, it's all up to me. This was what they had agreed upon. During the day, Na Raizong had volunteered to give the Mongol army a chance to perform. If they did not perform well, he would listen to Tiger's man's arrangements. Now that the truth was right in front of him, he had nothing to say. He nodded, "I'm willing to accept my loss. From now on, we'll just listen to Commander Tiger's arrangements." Outside the main tent, a group of Mongol leaders walked out. Some of them had looks of dissatisfaction on their faces. Their forces were too spread out. Sometimes, a small tribe would only have a few hundred cavalrymen, while the bigger tribes would only have a few thousand. Asking such a small faction to fight the 20,000 Tatar cavalry was simply sending them to their deaths. However, there was one person who did not say anything from start to finish. He was one of the leaders of the Mongol army, Demutu. He seemed to have a lot on his mind. When he returned to his tent, he quickly wrote a note, recording everything that had happened in the main tent. He then took out his gerfalcon and walked out of the tent. Using the excuse that it was convenient, he went to a secluded place and released the gerfalcon into the air. Chapter 884. Demutu had another identity. He was a pawn that Tuachuo Buhua had planted in the Gobi Mongol tribe. The reason he could become the leader of the tribe was because of Demuta's help. Now was the time to use this pawn. Very soon, the news reached Hubo, subordinates, who were 20 kilometers away. When he saw the note, he completely relaxed. It seemed like his worries were unnecessary. It was all because the mercenaries trusted the Gobi Mongol tribe too much. This was their chance. After God knows how many days, Hubo, could finally have a good night's sleep. They only had to wait until dawn to launch their attack. At that time, with Lakshan's attack from above and Demuta's help, they would be able to deal heavy damage to the mercenaries. On the black stone slope halfway up the mountain, Lakshan's army was also resting. They were also conserving their energy and waiting for the dawn to come so that they could counterattack with all their might. Before Tuachuo Buhua's main force arrived, they would first inflict heavy damage on the mercenaries and make a great contribution. The mercenaries' camp at the foot of the mountain also fell into silence. They were ordered to rest early after dinner, as though they were also preparing for the upcoming battle. However, very few people knew that the time they chose for the battle was not dawn, but the middle of the night. When it was the third night watch, which was the wee hours of the morning, the mercenary camp suddenly sounded a hurried whistle. The horn for an emergency assembly was officially blown. Countless soldiers in neat military uniforms walked out of the large tent, holding their sabers and leading their horses as they began to assemble. Although it was still pitch black at the top of Saihan Mountain, the densely packed mercenaries were already waiting with their swords in hand, ready for battle. The top of Saihan Mountain, which was where Lakshan's bait was not like what the outside world had guessed. There was only one battalion, but there were 20 battalions. In the past few days, the number of water carts delivering water to the top of the mountain had suddenly increased. However, few people knew that every carriage that went up the mountain was filled with mercenaries. They used the excuse of delivering water as an excuse to sneak into the mountain. All of this was part of Yang Qindong's plan. He wasn't a god, so he naturally didn't expect the Tatar army to use this as an attacking point to start the first battle. The reason why he had arranged for 20 battalions of soldiers and horses to be stationed here was to have an opportunity to deal a heavy blow to the Tatar army. However, he did not expect that it would come in handy so soon. The person in charge of hiding and guarding the mountain was none other than Su Yunsheng, who had just been promoted to captain of the reconnaissance team. This Su Yunsheng was an old man. When Yang Qindong was fighting in the southern Ming dynasty, he had served in the military. It could be said that he was a person with many military achievements. However, considering the importance of scouts and the extremely high standards of personnel, his official position was not high. However, as a regiment commander, he was given the rank of senior colonel, which was enough to prove his worth. If there came a day when he was no longer willing to work in the reconnaissance group, he was more than qualified to be a division commander. The mercenaries had their own security bureau, but it was hard to guarantee that the other forces would have their own intelligence organizations. Knowing that it was very likely that the senior officers under his command had already been targeted, Yang Qindong did not use them this time. Instead, he sent Su Yunsheng, who had always been elusive, to the mountain to be in charge of this undercover mission. Tianhu and Bai Shuang were also on the mission with Su Yunsheng. They were all outstanding students in the First City Academy, especially in the field of military studies. This time, the two of them were assigned to cooperate with Captain Su in the battle, which was also a chance for them to participate in actual combat. 3 smart people, 3 capable people gathered together, so their strength could be imagined. When they received the report from the foot of the mountain that someone had set their sights on Mount Saihan, the 3 of them discussed and decided to beat them at their own game. They took the initiative to give up the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain. While showing weakness to the enemy, they were also looking for the best opportunity. Originally, the 3 of them were a little distressed. If Lakshan's troops attacked the top of the mountain, what would they do? They didn't expect the other party to cooperate with them so much that they would surround them but not attack. This made the 3 of them overjoyed, and at the same time, they arranged for the 20 battalions to rest early. At around 11 o'clock at night, they woke everyone up and prepared for the night attack. Night battle was one of the subjects that the mercenaries often trained in. When their nutrition could completely keep up, the so-called night blindness had nothing to do with them. With such a foundation, they already had the conditions to fight at night. And tonight was the time for them to launch a large-scale counterattack. Didn't Lakshan want to launch a two-pronged attack? Well, then let's give him a taste of his own medicine. Let's launch a two-pronged attack and completely annihilate him. The timing was a few hours earlier than the other party's attack, and they were already prepared. This allowed the mercenaries to gain the upper hand and have more chances of winning. In the early hours of the morning, the mercenary camp at the foot of the mountain became lively. With a flash bomb that lit up the sky for half a day, the general attack began. Troops began to attack Mount Saihan one after another. The sudden attack caught the enemy, who was resting on the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain, off guard. Lakshan came out of the large tent. As he put on his armor, he asked Mu Chi, who had rushed over, "What's going on?" "I'm not sure yet, but it seems like the mercenaries launched the attack in advance," Mu Chi replied with a puzzled expression. "Attacking at night or charging up the mountain, I really don't know who gave the mercenaries the courage to face the enemy like this." "Oh right, there's still a battalion of enemies on the mountain. There's no need to keep them here. Quickly send people to take them down." Lakshan's face revealed a cold expression. Although the mercenaries' strategy of attacking in the middle of the night was somewhat unexpected, he had the higher ground and did not slack off in his defense at night. It would not be easy for anyone to attack up the mountain. He only needed to wait until dawn, when his vision was no longer obstructed, and then he could lead the main force to launch a counterattack. However, would the mercenaries give them a chance to launch a counterattack? Just as Lakshan was still giving orders to Mu Chi, deafening battle cries suddenly sounded from the top of Mount Saihan behind them. 8,000 mercenaries charged down the mountain like ferocious tigers. Poor Lakshan. He had never taken the mercenaries on the mountain seriously, so he only arranged for 1,000 soldiers to defend. Logically speaking, 1,000 soldiers should be enough to fight against 400, but 1,000 against 8,000 was not a small difference. The 1,000 Tatar army did not even have time to figure out what was going on. They were greeted by a rain of arrows. Hundreds of people were injured and killed by the arrows. Then, their defensive line was instantly overwhelmed by the mercenaries who rushed down the mountain. Su Yunsheng, who was mixed in with the army, laughed loudly and waved the saber in his hand as he shouted, "Comrades, it's time to perform meritorious deeds. Charge! Charge!" Tian Hu and Bai Shuang also shouted crazily, their eyes flashing with excitement. The sudden appearance of the 8,000 mercenaries made the Tatar army dizzy. They had no idea where so many enemies had come from. Lakshan continuously mobilized his army to stop the Tatar army while lighting 3 bonfires that he had prepared beforehand. This was a signal for reinforcements. If the situation became dangerous, he would be able to use this to call for help from Hubo, or subordinates. The sudden movement of the mercenaries naturally did not escape the eyes of Hubo, or scouts. After the news was reported, Hubo, or got out of bed and saw the 3 bonfires lit. This made him very confused. What's going on? The battle has just begun. Why is General Lakshan asking for help? Are the mercenaries really so brave that they have already reached the middle of the mountain? Impossible. Muren shook his head. The magnetite slope is a gentle slope that is about 2 li long. Although it is not very steep, it is long. The mercenaries could not have reached the middle of the slope so quickly. That's right. The terrain there is easy to defend and hard to attack. It is impossible for them to fall so quickly. General Hulan agreed. Forget it, forget it. Let's not worry about that for now. Since Lakshan has requested for help, he must have met with some unsolvable problem. How about this? We will immediately support him. General Hulan, quickly gather 5,000 cavalrymen and launch a fierce attack on the mercenary camp. General Mu Ren, follow up with 5,000 cavalrymen. No matter what, you must attract the attention of the mercenaries and reduce the pressure on General Lakshan. The sudden attack of the mercenaries caused the entire battlefield to move. Countless mercenaries moved out in an orderly manner, as though they had already decided on their target. On the other hand, the leaders of the Mongol tribes gathered in Narisong's tent with sleepy eyes. Even now, they did not know what was going on. All right, since everyone is here, I will now assign the tasks. But before that, there's something we need to do first. Where's General Erdemutu? Na Rizong suddenly shouted as he looked at everyone with an excited expression. Yes. Instinctively, Erdemutu responded. As soon as he agreed, two burly Mongolian men immediately rushed towards him. Seeing that the situation was not good, he wanted to pull out his sword to resist. However, how could he be a match for them when they were unprepared? He was immediately pressed down. After being pressed down firmly, Erdemutu struggled to no avail. He immediately shouted, Narisong, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to use this opportunity to eliminate the dissidents? And all of you, are you just going to watch? Let me tell you, if he takes care of me today, he will take care of all of you tomorrow. Shut up, you traitor. Seeing that there was indeed a commotion in the crowd, Narisong immediately shouted. Originally, some of the leaders wanted to ask Narisong what he was trying to do. If he really wanted to eliminate them, then they would have to fight back. However, once they heard the word traitor, they immediately shut their mouths. Chapter 885. Erdemutu, you are the traitor that Tuachuo Buhua planted in our tribe. Here are the letters you left behind when you contacted them. What else do you have to say? Na Rizong threw the letters onto the table. You searched my tent. Na Rizong, what right do you have to do that? Leaders and generals, he can search my tent for no reason today. Tomorrow, he might do the same to you. Everyone, you have to fight back. Erdemutu saw that the situation was not good, so he tried to persuade everyone. That's enough. Keep your mouth shut. Erdemutu, everyone else went back to their own tents after the meeting. You were the only one who let out a gerfalcon. What is the meaning of this? Who are you sending a message to? Do you think you did it without anyone knowing? Let me tell you, your every move has been discovered. What else do you have to say for searching your tent? Na Rizong would not allow Erdemutu to argue. He pointed out all kinds of mistakes. For a moment, the leaders and generals in the tent did not dare to make a move. Erdemutu only left those letters as evidence when he returned to Tuachuo Buhua's side in the future. He did not expect that the letters would become evidence of his crimes. At this moment, he knew that he could not change the situation. He could only shout, that's right. I am Tuachuo Buhua's man. He is the ruler of the grassland. Yang Chendong is just a Han. How can he lead us? Sooner or later, they will devour all of us. What we are doing now is helping the evildoer. Men, shut his mouth. Take him away and behead him in public. Also, behead his family in the tribe. This is the fate of a traitor. Na Rizong's eyes were cold. He was really angry at this moment. Before the war, the Mongol tribe of the Gobi Desert did not want to kill the enemy. Instead, they wanted to collude with the enemy. This made him feel humiliated. None of the leaders or generals pleaded for Erdemutu's fate. Since he was a traitor to the entire Gobi Desert Mongol tribe. Not only could the mercenaries not tolerate such a person, even they would not allow him to exist. No one wanted to feel like they were being watched by a traitor. At the foot of the mountain, Hu Lin led 5,000 cavalrymen and charged down Mount Saihan. The mercenaries had already expected Yang Chendong's appearance. It was said that besieging a stronghold to attack reinforcements was our army's specialty during wartime. Yang Chendong was very proficient in commanding such a battle. In this plan, the Tatar division had long been waiting along the path that they had to pass through. They were only waiting for the 5,000 cavalry led by Hu Lin to appear in the encirclement. Then, heaven-shaking battle cries sounded from both sides. A total of 20 battalions and a division of 8,100 cavalry charged out from both sides. The sound of arrows piercing through the air shot towards the unprepared but anxious Tatar cavalry. It was not the first time for Su He to fight a war between Tatars and Tatars. In the past, he was Agador's subordinate and did not get along well with Tuachuo. Now that he had such an opportunity, how could he be lenient? The 8,000 cavalrymen launched a surprise attack with their bows and arrows, killing at least 500 cavalrymen and injuring countless enemies. Hu Lin, who was charging, was stunned by this sudden ambush. Hu Lin was not a brainless person. After receiving the order, he was already prepared to be ambushed. However, he had only left the camp for 5 miles. How could he have encountered the enemy? Didn't this mean that the enemy's troops were all at his doorstep? Were the scouts of the Tatar army all incompetent? This was a little unfair to those scouts. Su He and the others had only just moved here. Before the scouts of the other side could report back, everything had already begun. Unprepared, Hu Lin's army retreated again and again until they met Mu Ren and the 5,000 cavalrymen behind them. Only then did they stabilize their footing. At that moment, the two armies converged and charged towards the Tatar division. Retreat. Su He did not want to fight head-on with the other side. Seeing that he had already gained a lot of advantages and had killed more than 2,000 enemies with his bows and arrows, he let the horn officer blow the horn. A division of cavalrymen quickly retreated. Chase. Hu Lin, who had been beaten until he was dizzy, was furious. Without doing anything, he had lost 40% of his troops. A flame of anger burned in his heart. He could not wait to charge forward and kill the mercenaries. General Hu, the situation is not right. It is better not to be rash. Seeing that the mercenaries had retreated the moment he appeared, Mu Ren had a bad feeling. Logically speaking, the other side should have been prepared and should not have retreated. It was as if they were tempting him to continue. What is wrong? It is obvious that the other side is cowardly and does not dare to face our cavalrymen head-on. They only know how to shoot arrows. If General Mu is afraid, then wait here for General Hu's arrival. I will bring my men and chase after them. The furious Hu Lin had lost his mind at this time. All he thought about was taking revenge for his brothers. How could he listen to anyone else's words? Hu Lin did not listen to his advice and continued to chase. Mu Ren could only shake his head and smile bitterly. While ordering the army to follow, he also sent someone to report the situation to General Hu Bo, and ask him to immediately send out the necessary reinforcements. Moreover, Hu Lin took the lead, leading the remaining 3,000 cavalrymen in a fierce chase. In just an hour, they arrived at the foot of Mount Saihan. At this moment, the Tatar division that had been retreating earlier had stopped in their tracks and gotten into formation. It looked as though they would charge forward and devour them if they dared to come over. One side had a division of 20 battalions and 8,100 people. The other side only had 3,000 people. Hu Lin was furious, but at this moment, he could only suppress his anger and wait for the main force behind him to arrive. The first to arrive was Mu Ren. About a quarter of an hour after he arrived, General Hu Bo, also arrived. Following him were 8,000 cavalrymen. In other words, only 2,000 cavalrymen were left behind to guard the headquarters. What's the situation? The moment Hu Bo arrived, his gaze first fell on General Su He and the enemy cavalrymen. He then raised his head to look at the dense sounds of fighting halfway up Saihan Mountain. The torches there were connected to one another. Looking from afar, one could still feel the intensity of the battle. General, there are close to 10,000 mercenaries blocking our way. Hu Lin requests to charge. After seeing Hu Bo, Hu Lin was filled with courage. General, the situation on the mountain doesn't seem right. Logically speaking, after fighting for so long, General Lakshan should have chased the mercenaries down the mountain. Why is it still in a stalemate? Mu Ren raised his head to look at the mountain with a puzzled expression. Even if the mercenaries suddenly attacked, with the terrain, Lakshan should have chased them down the mountain very quickly. How could the battle still not end after 2 hours? Although they were too far away and couldn't see the situation clearly, they could tell from the battle cries that this wasn't a situation where one side had a complete advantage. Instead, the battle was in a stalemate. This was a very strange thing. That's right, the situation is unclear. Let's wait and see. Since they could not figure out the situation, Hu Bo decided to be careful and observe the situation. If Lakshan was doomed, then he would retreat immediately and not continue to fight the mercenaries. What's there to wait for? Didn't the report say that the Mongolian tribes in the northeast sent out 20,000 cavalrymen to help the mercenaries? They must be the ones attacking the mountain, causing the stalemate. These mercenaries sure have a good plan. Using other people's soldiers to attack us, they are using a borrowed knife to kill us. Hu Lin saw that no one was paying attention to him and was extremely dissatisfied. Seeing that Hu Bo was still suspicious, he immediately voiced out his thoughts. Oh, that makes sense. Hearing Hu Lin's words, Hu Bo nodded in agreement. This was enough to show that if he was the commander of the mercenaries, he would also think of a way to use the 20,000 cavalrymen. After all, they were not his trusted subordinates. If they died, it would not be a pity. On the contrary, he would be able to use this opportunity to get rid of his enemies. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But will they be so obedient? Mu Ren raised his own objection. That was 20,000 cavalrymen. Their military strength was no less than the new mercenary army. They would be so obedient. If someone told them to charge, they would charge even if they knew it would be difficult. They would even charge even if they would suffer heavy losses. That makes sense. Hu Bo nodded. Originally, he wasn't such an indecisive person. But after losing to the mercenaries in Tulu City, he was really scared. Now, he was very careful and cautious in everything he did. The commander was hesitant, but this made Hu Lin anxious. Without receiving any orders, he could only suppress his urge to charge out and watch helplessly. Hu Bo, subordinate, Mu Ren, looked at the mountainside. He believed that even if the 20,000 Mongol soldiers charged out, they would not be able to last for long. After all, they were limited by the terrain and their numbers were similar. With the terrain, Lakshan's victory was only a matter of time. Time passed minute by minute. Another hour had passed. Finally, the battle cries from halfway up the mountain became softer. Many of the torches on the mountain that seemed to cover the sky had also been extinguished. Seeing this, Mu Ren finally heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Hu Bo and said, "General, I believe that General Lakshan has already stabilized the situation. The enemy's morale must have dropped. This is the time for us to pincer attack." "That's right. Come, pass down my orders. Prepare to charge." Hu Bo was also relieved. He laughed and was about to give the order to charge. At this moment, a soldier beside him suddenly shouted, "Fire, fire, it's right behind us. It seems to be the direction of our camp." Chapter 886. This shout attracted the attention of the 3 generals. At this moment, the fire seemed to have lit up half the sky. The experienced soldiers estimated that it was about 20 miles away. Wasn't that their camp? What's going on? Hu Bo asked in confusion. Shouldn't the mercenaries focus on attacking the mountain and stopping them? How could they still have the energy to attack their own camp? No one answered Hu Bo's question. After a few moments of silence, countless shouts came from all directions. Following that, the scouts around the army quickly reported back. "General, there are enemies in the east. General, there are enemies in the west. There are countless of them. General, there are people behind us. Because it's too dark, we can't see how many people there are. We can only see the torches and shadows." Hu Bo's expression changed again and again. He couldn't understand why so many enemies had suddenly appeared. Where did they come from? How could the mercenaries have so many soldiers? Could it be that all the mercenaries in the beginning city had been mobilized? Hu Bo obviously did not understand. These were the 20,000 cavalrymen from the Gobi Mongol tribe, as well as the new heavy cavalry, light cavalry and the scouts. Just as Mu Ren had suspected, charging up the mountain was not something that anyone was willing to do. Even if the mercenaries gave the order, the Gobi Mongol army would not follow it. This was obviously a suicidal move. It was not something that could be obeyed with just a single order. In fact, the army attacking the mountain was only one division of the new army. Of course, there were also the 8,000 mercenaries who had charged down from the top of Saihan Mountain. Su Yunsheng suddenly brought 8,000 soldiers down from the sky and caught Lakshan off guard. Although he did not understand why there were 20 enemy battalions on the mountain, the battle had already begun and he had no way out. First, he sent Mu Qi to lead 5,000 soldiers to stop the mercenaries' charge. With the advantage in preparation, how could 5,000 soldiers stop them? In less than an hour, the army was defeated and Mu Qi died in the battle. At this moment, the new division of the new army began their attack from the foot of the mountain. For a moment, Lakshan was attacked from both sides, and the situation was critical. Taking advantage of the chaos in the Tatar army, Su Yunsheng rushed down the mountain, broke through several enemy lines of defense, killed his way to the pass of the Black Stone Slope, and seized it. No one stopped them anymore. The recruits at the foot of the mountain successfully ascended the mountain. After the two armies met, they had a huge advantage in terms of numbers. They charged straight for Lakshan's army. Amidst the chaos and the death of their general, the morale of the Tatar army plummeted. They were no match for Su Yunsheng and Lu Zhua. Amidst the chaos, many Tatar cavalrymen dismounted and surrendered. Only Lakshan and his 5,000 cavalrymen continued to resist. The chaotic scene that Hu Bo and Mu Ren saw at the foot of the mountain was exactly this moment, and it was completely different from what they had guessed. It wasn't Lakshan who was killing the mercenaries, but the mercenaries who were fighting back. They only had 5,000 cavalrymen, and they were all panicking and low in morale. How could they be a match for the mercenaries who were full of fighting spirit? After a few attacks, the formation of the army was in chaos, and their morale was low. In less than an hour, Lakshan had died, and his cavalrymen had either died or surrendered. The battle at the waist of the mountain had ended, and the next step was to deal with Hu Bo's troops at the foot of the mountain. According to Yang Chendong's words, it was like eating one and watching one. Now that they had finished eating, it was time to eat the one they had been watching. Hu Bo had made the wrong judgment, thinking that they had the advantage in the chaos at the waist of the mountain. Due to the wrong analysis of the situation, and the mistake of not choosing to escape, they had completed the encirclement in the 2 hours they had been at the foot of the mountain. 20,000 cavalrymen were currently charging towards Hu Bo's 16,000 cavalrymen from all directions. The first to act were the mercenaries, and Tiger's man personally led his troops to attack. An independent division was not part of the first army, and Tiger's man could not stop them. However, the only thing he could do was to transfer the 6-gun battalions from the independent division to the army. Now, the first one to charge at them was this gun squad. More than 2,000 pitch-black muzzles from the 6 battalions rang out, landing in the midst of the Tatar cavalry, drawing out streams of blood and taking away the lives of several hundred cavalry. "Break out, all of you break out." Seeing that the enemy in front of them had guns and was so ferocious, Hu Bo had no choice but to give up on the idea of joining forces with Lakshan. Instead, she rode her horse out. She had no idea how many enemies there were outside, and in the darkness, she could not determine the enemy's strength. The only thing she could do was try her luck and charge in all directions. Chase! The Tatar division commander Su He saw that the enemy was about to escape, and he immediately led his 8,000 troops to give chase. At that moment, the bugle call for all troops to charge sounded out, and at the foot of Saihan Mountain, battle cries rang out everywhere. This was not a fair battle. Be it in terms of numbers or morale, before the battle even started, the Tatar cavalrymen were already in a passive position. Compared to the Tatar army that was like a headless fly, there were enemies everywhere, and they did not know when an arrow would land on them. As there were simply too many enemies, in order not to become a target, they even extinguished their torches. This caused many of them to run straight to the mercenaries and be killed or captured. The chaos on the battlefield lasted from night till dawn, and the mercenaries and the Mongol tribesmen killed and captured until dawn. Close to 20,000 Tatar troops were wiped out in one night, and in the end, only Hu Bo, Mu Ren and a few hundred others managed to escape. Even Hu Lin was killed by arrows. The North Ming Xian Mansion's commander-in-chief, who was also the commander-in-chief, Shi Wanlin, and the deputy commander-in-chief, who was also the commander-in-chief, Ning Wenfeng, used the excuse of returning to Lu City from Shi City as an excuse to pass by the battlefield and witness the end of the battle. They saw that the Tatar army lost 40,000 cavalrymen in just one night. Among them, 10,000 were killed and 30,000 were captured. The two of them remained silent. This kind of result was unimaginable. After having a direct understanding of the mercenaries' strength, they began to worry. If one day they were to become enemies with the mercenaries, would they be beaten like the Tatar cavalry without any strength to fight back? Compared to the two Baiming generals who were depressed, the 20,000 Mongol tribesmen were overjoyed. On this very night, they captured 10,000 enemies and seized countless warhorses, swords, and spears. However, they had only paid the price of less than 500 casualties. Such a huge victory was hard to come by in 100 years, and at this moment, they were filled with admiration for the strength of the mercenaries. It also made many of them more determined to follow the Heavenly Khan. The new army captured 20,000 enemies, and 2,000 died in the battle, and 3,000 were injured. This was mainly because they were heavily injured in the Battle of Shenshur Slope. However, this loss was nothing compared to what they had gained. Not long after, when the results of the battle reached Shi City, the entire city cheered and shouted, "Long live the Heavenly Khan," as they walked on the streets to celebrate. Inside the Yang mansion, compared to the silence outside, it was unusually quiet. Considering that the sixth young master had too many important matters to consider, the commoners within 2 miles of the Yang mansion were all cleared to create a quiet environment for him. Of course, because of this, his safety was much more guaranteed. Yang Qindong sat in the courtyard, and in front of him was the latest battle report. His right hand gently placed the report on the stone table, and Yang Qindong stood up and tidied his clothes. He knew that it was time for the final battle with the Tatar cavalry. Since the establishment of Shi City, it was first Agar Dorji from the Tatar tribe who brought 50,000 soldiers to find trouble with him, and then Hu Bo, who brought 50,000 soldiers to find trouble with him. Now that they had all been defeated, Tua Buhua had finally appeared. He had brought 80,000 soldiers, and in the first battle, he had killed 40,000 enemies. It must be very painful for him. "I'm a good person, and I like to do good deeds. Let me end your pain." Yang Qindong smiled and walked out of the Yang family manor. On a huge plain north of Saihan, the mercenaries and the Tatar cavalry finally met. Yang Qindong, the Heavenly Khan, and Tua Buhua officially met here. When a king meets a king must die. In just one night, half of the soldiers had been lost. When the news reached Tua Buhua's ears, his usually calm face revealed a trace of shock. Soon after, Hu Bo, and Mu Ren who had escaped were brought to his main tent. Tuachuo Buhua's figure wasn't very tall. He was only 1.73 meters tall, and his weight of 120 kilograms made him look even less burly. However, it was this person who had unified the Tatar tribe and became their Khan. Once upon a time, Tua Buhua had caused many people to not be able to eat or sleep well. He had also caused many people to fear and hate him, including the great Ming dynasty and the Walla's leader, Yes Hen. But now, he had been beaten to such a state. He was not willing to accept this. After hearing Hu Bo's report, Tua Buhua stretched out his right hand and pointed at the trembling Hu Bo. Then, his finger moved and landed on Mu Ren. A defeated general must be punished. Otherwise, how can he lead the army? Men, drag him out and behead him in public. He'll be sacrificed to the army. Ah! Great Khan, no. I'm willing to be the leader of the suicide squad. I only ask that you give me a chance. General Hu, save me, save me. Amidst the shouts, the Mu Ren was dragged out of the main tent. Hu Bo, was left trembling. He knew that just now, the Khan had revealed his intention to kill him. He had taken a trip to the gates of hell. Chapter 887. You. Do you know what to do next? Tuachuo Buhua pointed at Hu Bo again. I know. I am willing to be the leader of the suicide squad. I only hope that Great Khan will give me a chance to die like a brave warrior. Hu Bo raised his head as tears welled up in his eyes. Good, I will give you a chance. General Menk, you and Hu Bo will be in charge of the left and right armies. This Khan will be in charge of the middle army. Let us work together and fight to the death with this great Ming brat. If we win, the glory of our Tatar tribe will be reborn. If we lose, then let us turn into a pile of yellow soil and be buried here forever. Yes. Another burly man in armor in the main tent responded, and then half knelt on the ground. Right now, Tuachuo Buhua still had 30,000 elite Tatar cavalry and 10,000 ordinary cavalry. In terms of numbers, the mercenaries had 50,000, including 20,000 from the Mongol tribe. The difference in numbers was 10,000. However, Tuachuo Buhua was leading the most elite Tatar cavalry. On the battlefield, they could take on 3, 5, or even more. Just from this point alone, they still had a chance of victory. At this point, Tuachuo Buhua did not want to retreat anymore. With 40,000 cavalry, he could go to other places and become a king. However, the humiliation that the mercenaries had brought them had to be washed away. Otherwise, even if he died, he would not be able to rest in peace. Both sides had close to 100,000 cavalry in total. From afar, tents were next to tents, and war horses were next to war horses. Everyone seemed to know that this was a battle to the death. No one held any hope. Just like that, blade against blade, spear against spear, they laid out their chariots and horses. There was no discussion, but they all made the same decision to fight to the death the next day. Within the main tent of the mercenaries, Yang Chendong was holding a meeting with all the generals. This meeting was different from the previous ones. There was not even a sand table in front of them, nor were there any battle plans. At the start of the meeting, as the leader, Yang Chendong had already set the tone. There's no need for any strategy in this battle. Tua won't use any tricks, nor will he divide his forces to create an opportunity for us. Some of them are just warhorses charging head-on. Some of them are just to see whose bones are harder and whose saber is sharper. Let me ask you, are you afraid? Not at all. All the officers replied in unison, their voices echoing throughout the main tent. All right. Yang Chendong looked at everyone with an encouraging gaze. Then, he pointed at Su He and said, Division Commander Su, I'll let you introduce the 30,000 elite cavalry under Tuachuo Buhua. Yes. Su He stood up and saluted Yang Chendong and the other officers. As a former member of the Tatar cavalry, he was very familiar with the situation of this cavalry. Comrades, there are only 40,000 cavalry left. 10,000 of them are ordinary cavalry. There is no need to worry about them. I believe that any of our troops can defeat them. He. Hearing such confident words, the officers present all had smiles on their faces. Even the small leaders of the Mongol tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert laughed along. Although their combat strength was average, they had the advantage in numbers. As the saying goes, a random fist can kill a master. Who are they afraid of? While the officers were laughing, Suhi's face became serious. However, the 30,000 elite cavalry cannot be underestimated. Tuachuo Buhua spent a lot of effort to create them. Although they may not have been through hundreds of battles, they are veterans who have been through dozens of battles. They have rich combat experience and will not retreat without orders. Even if their formation is attacked, they will rely on a small number of people to deal with the enemy until the end of the battle or until all of them die. At this point, Suhi seemed to see the disdain on the faces of the officers present. He continued in a deep voice, "You may not know this, but Agadorji was bewitched by Yeshen and surrounded Tua Buhua with him. At that time, he only had 5,000 cavalry with him. However, with these 5,000 cavalry, he was able to break out of the encirclement. Do you know how many cavalrymen he faced at that time? There were a total of 100,000 of them, but they still left as if there was no one around." Hiss. The sound of cold air being sucked in could be heard. 5,000 cavalrymen were able to break out of the encirclement of 100,000 people. This was an incredible achievement. Division Commander Su, have you fought with them before? The commander of the new army, Tiger Main, asked. He firmly believed that seeing was believing. If this was just hearsay, it was not enough to believe. Commander Tiger, I am ashamed to say this, but I have fought with them before. At that time, I led 10,000 cavalrymen and was on the outside of the encirclement. However, when the 5,000 cavalrymen rushed out, I sent some soldiers to stop them. After a chaotic battle, they managed to escape. After the battle, we lost 1,300 cavalrymen while they only left behind a few dozen corpses. At this point, Suhi couldn't help but lower his head. This achievement was one of the biggest defeats in his life. It was obvious that he really didn't want to talk about it. However, at this moment, no one looked down on Suhi. Instead, everyone fell into silence. The atmosphere in the tent was very oppressive. The strength of these 30,000 elite cavalry was beyond everyone's imagination. For a moment, everyone was at a loss of what to do. Even some of the leaders of the North Desert unknowingly showed fear on their faces. They were probably thinking of retreating at this moment. The morale of the generals quickly fell at this moment. Suhi's voice continued to sound. These cavalrymen are completely different from ordinary cavalrymen. They hold a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. They rely on their superb horse skills to maintain their balance on the battlefield. The sword is a Mongolian scimitar. In close combat, it is more in line with the principles of mechanics. It doesn't need the soldier's own strength. Just the charge of the horse is enough to easily cut off the enemy's head. This saves a lot of energy in the process. The shield can be used to block the enemy's sword. This way, they can better protect themselves. It is this combination of a sword and a shield that allows them to have the strongest spear and the strongest shield at the same time. Often when you are fighting for your life, when you slash with your sword, the shield will block it. If you don't react fast enough, the enemy's scimitar will chop your neck. At that time, because I didn't understand this point, the cavalrymen under my command suffered a great loss. Even the dozens of cavalrymen who were able to kill the enemy were only able to achieve a small result because of the crowd. After explaining everything he knew and understood, Suhi saluted Yang Chendong and returned to the group. Then, everyone's gaze fell on Yang Chendong. In many of their hearts, this was the god of war. This was the 100 victories general. The battles under his command would never fail. When everyone's gaze fell on him, Yang Chendong's originally calm face revealed a trace of a smile. The strongest shield and the strongest spear. Interesting. But I don't know how strong their shields will be when they are faced with muskets. Ha ha ha. With just a few words, the atmosphere in the main tent instantly relaxed. That's right, no matter how strong you are, when facing the muskets and cannons, can you really be invulnerable? Everyone laughed, and the original atmosphere was no longer that oppressive. Yang Chendong timely stretched out his hand and pressed it down. For a moment, the tent became quiet again. We have muskets and powerful cannons, but I don't think these are the treasures that can defeat all opponents. If we want to become the strongest cavalrymen in the world, then we are destined to gather the strengths of others and the strengths of others. We must learn from each other's strengths to make up for our weaknesses. In the end, we will become the invincible and undefeatable cavalry of the prairie. The 30,000 elite cavalrymen of the Tatar Empire may be very strong, but in my opinion, they are more like a whetstone blade that sharpens us. Let's put it this way, I am preparing to build another division. This division will be called the 1st Cavalry Division. It will have 3 regiments, each with 5 battalions, a total of 6,000 men. This division commander, 3 regimental commanders, and 15 battalion commanders will not be appointed based on seniority or nationality. It will all be based on personal strength. It will all be based on personal bravery and merit. Their treatment is far better than the other units. It is the same as the current Cold Vanguard unit, or even better. Let's put it this way. To be able to enter this division, one's whole family will ascend to heaven. When a Han rider enters the division, a hero's plate will be hung high in the family, and it will be respected by the world. When a foreign rider enters the division, he will be registered as a Han citizen. From a soldier to an officer, he will be able to bring one of his family members to be registered as a Han citizen. If he is promoted, he will be able to bring his whole family to be registered as a Han citizen. Before Yang Qindong could finish his words, the entire main tent was already bustling with noise and excitement. Anyone who had been to the first city would know the importance of being registered as a Han citizen. In the past, this people who were regarded as herbivores and were called weak and bullied had a high status that people could only envy and look up to. As long as one was a Han citizen, whether it was dividing land, paying taxes, or buying things, they had a lot of privileges. Even the rule in the first city that outsiders had to live in for 5 years to be qualified to own a local house was reduced to 3 years when it fell on the Han citizens. This was only one of the embodiments. There were many other benefits that could not be described in detail. Let's put it this way. As long as you were a Han citizen, you were born to be superior to others. Even if you went to work, your salary would be 1.5 times or even more than 2 times that of other ethnic groups. Not to mention getting a job in the city. Whether a Han citizen wanted to be an official or join the army, the conditions would be much lower. Because of this, the Han people became a high and mighty existence. In order to be on good terms with them, countless young Mongolian girls in the city vowed to only marry Han men so that their next generation could live better. Chapter 888. There were many benefits to being a Han person, and everyone had a deep understanding of it. Fortunately, the Han people did not have the habit of bullying other races, or rather, they did not have the time to develop this habit. Although the other races were somewhat dissatisfied, they could not find a reason to express it. However, it was undeniable that they also yearned to become Han people in their hearts. It was just that there was no opportunity to obtain this power. For example, one of the higher-ups in the army, the Tatar division commander Suhi, was still a Tatar. Even such a general could not become a Han person, let alone others. This matter of promotion could only be an idea. But now, Yang Qindong formally raised this issue in front of everyone and gave the corresponding conditions. As long as they could meet these conditions, they would be promoted. This made everyone see hope. Some of the small tribal leaders who originally wanted to retreat were also moved because of this. They clenched their fists tightly and had an appearance of wanting to perform well. Everyone's morale was completely stimulated by Yang Qindong's words. The conditions are there. If you can kill 3 Tatar elite cavalry, you can join the 1st Cavalry Division. If you kill 4 people, you will be a squad leader. If you kill 5 people, you will be a deputy platoon leader. If you kill 6 people, you will be a platoon leader, and so on. In short, the opportunity is in front of everyone. How to fight for it is up to everyone. Of course, if you are not the opponent of these elite cavalry, then retreat. I will use guns and cannons to solve everything in the end. Where to go, everyone can choose. At the end of the meeting, Yang Qindong gave everyone a reassurance that the 30,000 Tatar elite cavalry who were invincible in the eyes of others were not in his eyes. The reason why he did not use guns and cannons was because he wanted to use them as a whetstone to hone the combat power of the cavalry. With such a guarantee, how could everyone be afraid? A war was destined to not be lost. What was important was the performance of the battle process. The Han soldiers were thinking about how cool it would be to hang a hero's plate in their house. The grassland people were thinking about how their descendants would benefit from this action of theirs if it could be done. At this moment, no one was against the war in front of them, and no one showed any signs of fear. In fact, they didn't even want guns and cannons to appear on the battlefield, because they only had one thing in mind, and that was how they could perform well in this battle and successfully join the 1st Cavalry Division, so that they could bring glory to their ancestors and be respected by the future generations. Under Yang Chendong's intention, the contents of the meeting were quickly spread out. Then, the entire camp was in an uproar. Other than the fierce Tiger Regiment, all the other soldiers were tempted. Regardless of whether they were Han soldiers or foreign soldiers, they all had a goal in their hearts, and that was to perform better on the battlefield tomorrow. At daybreak, many soldiers got out of bed without being reminded. Then, they began to sharpen their sabers, wash their horses, check their stirrups, and other things. All of them were ready to do their best and perform well. The sky slowly brightened, and the cooks began to cook. The aroma began to spread in the camp, but at this moment, no matter how delicious the food was, it seemed to give everyone a sense of dullness. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the enemy camp 10 li away, and killing intent filled the sky. In the Tatar camp, Tuachuo Buhua also began to raise the tent after breakfast. 10,000 ordinary cavalry became logisticians, responsible for the army's food supply and other matters. The 30,000 elite cavalry divided into 3 different directions and began to move towards the mercenary camp. With these 30,000 invincible elite cavalry, Tuachuo Buhua was confident that he could defeat any opponent. Reality would also prove that the Tatar elite cavalry was undefeatable and undefeatable, the strongest cavalry in the world. According to the previous arrangement, Hu Boer would be on the left, Mink on the right, and he would personally lead 10,000 elite cavalry in the middle. As long as the 3 of them moved together, they would be able to break through the formation of the mercenaries, and finally kill their way to that ignorant brat who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. At that time, they would use the Mongolian curved horses to teach Yang Chendong how to behave, and tell him who was the strongest in the Central Plains. With the invincible elite cavalry of this era, Tuachuo Buhua was not afraid of any schemes from the mercenaries. He believed that in front of absolute strength, nothing could stop them from advancing. In the past, Yes Hen of the Wara Empire could not do it, and now, Yang Chendong could not do it either. With great ambition, the 30,000 elite Tatar cavalry set out. After advancing for 5 li, 6 li, 7 li, the mercenary camp did not move at all, and a look of disdain flashed across Tuachuo Buhua's eyes. He did not know what kind of game the enemy was playing, but he knew that when there was only 3 li left, his elite cavalry would be able to charge over. At that time, no one would be able to stop them. Pass down the order, prepare to attack. The arrogant Tuachuo Buhua sat on his horse and gave the order to the flag bearer. Boom, boom, boom. However, without waiting for the command flag to issue the order, 3 ear-splitting sounds of cannons rang out. The cannons landed about 200 meters in front of Tuachuo Buhua's left, middle, and right troops. The loud rumbling sound caused the elite cavalry to cry out in disarray. Even animals were afraid of fire and loud explosions, and war horses were even more so. Reality had proven that even the most well-trained war horses would lose control in front of the cannons. The 3 cannons completely wiped away the confidence on Tuachuo Buhua's face. For the first time, fear appeared in his heart. How much of his 30,000 elite cavalry would be able to fight against the mercenaries with such advanced weapons? Just as he was thinking, a rider came from the distance. It was the new commander of the army, Tiger's Mane. His epaulets sparkled under the sunlight as he shouted. Our heavenly Khan feels that Tuachuo Buhua is a hero and is willing to meet you with weapons in the spirit of mutual appreciation. This time, the enemy can only send out 2,000 cavalry to fight, regardless of life or death. This is the condition that our heavenly Khan has proposed. We are both using cavalry. This is already the greatest respect to Tuachuo Buhua Khan. I also hope that you can abide by the rules. Otherwise, the artillery just now is just an appetizer. Soon, this area will be covered by artillery. At that time, I don't think I need to tell you what will happen. You can choose where you want to go or what you want to do. Hiya. Yang Chendong was the only one who could send a military commander as a messenger. After completing the mission, Tiger's Mane rode back to the barracks and came in front of Yang Chendong. "Young master, I finished." "I heard." Yang Chendong nodded. "Young master, can I participate in the next battle?" Taking advantage of this opportunity, Hu Meng tried to sound Yi Futian out. "No," he replied firmly. Then he said that you and the deputy commander can't participate in the battle. Other than that, the others can do as they wish. Tiger's Mane was the person he trusted the most. He could not lose him. Although the name of the 1st Cavalry Division was dazzling and attractive, Tiger's Mane was already the commander of the new army. There was no need for him to take this path. As for Tuochuo Buhua, although his horsemanship was not bad, it was only not bad. In a real battle, anything could happen. It was too much of a waste to send such a wise commander to the front lines. If something happened to him, it would be too late for regrets. This was an absolute order. Even though Hu Meng wanted to perform well and prove that his horsemanship had improved greatly during this period of time, since it was the 6th young master who had ordered him to do so, he naturally wouldn't disobey. He could only agree and leave. In front of the elite Tatar cavalry, Tuochuo Buhua called Hu Bo, and Menk over to discuss military matters. "Now that you know the situation, tell me what to do." Originally, Tuochuo Buhua was full of confidence and wanted to crush the mercenaries. However, before the battle even began, their morale had already taken a huge hit. Now, Tuochuo Buhua felt a heavy pressure in his heart that made it hard for him to breathe. The mercenaries' cannons are too powerful. If those 3 cannons landed in our army, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hu Bo did not express his opinion first. Instead, he spoke in a tactful manner. When he said this, the 3 of them were speechless. After a short while, Menk spoke up, "So be it. With our elite cavalry strength, I don't believe that we can't take care of them. As time goes on, we will kill more and more people. At that time, we will still be able to obtain victory." This meant that he had agreed to the other party's request. Although Tuochuo Buhua did not want to, the mercenaries had powerful cannons. Unless he retreated now, he could only follow the other party's plan. "Alright, then let's do it. We will use our true strength to show them how strong our elite Tatar cavalry is and how undefeatable we are." Tuochuo Buhua wanted to defeat Yang Chendong. The first city behind him was too prosperous and was built on the grasslands. It was like a tree without roots. This was a base that he urgently needed. As long as he took down this place, it would not be long before he could repeat the glory of the Tatar tribe. This huge temptation made him unable to retreat. He could only play according to Yang Chendong's rules. The Tatar army agreed and sent out the first group of 2,000 cavalry. This group of cavalry was personally led by Menk. Clearly, they wanted to win the lottery. Facing the 2,000 elite cavalry sent out by the Tatar army, the mercenaries also sent out 2,000 cavalry from the north of the desert. It was clear that the promotion last night had moved many people. There were many small leaders who volunteered to fight. Perhaps they were worried that if they did not take the initiative in the beginning, they would not have the chance to do so in the future. Chapter 889. Tell the cavalry warriors that as long as they kill 3 people, they can retreat. Of course, if you still have the ability, you can choose to kill more people. There will be different military merits waiting for you. We have people on the side watching and recording. Of course, if you feel that you can't win, you can retreat. You won't be charged with desertion. In front of the first echelon of 2,000 foreign tribe cavalry and tens of thousands of soldiers, Yang Chendong made such a solemn promise. He was now the heavenly Khan. Every word he said was no less than an imperial edict. The reason why he made such a concession was because he was worried that the Tatar elite cavalry was too powerful and would scare these warriors. In the end, no one dared to fight, and that would be a joke. With such a promise, they could retreat if they killed 3 people. If they couldn't win, they could retreat. Just based on these 2 points, those who didn't dare to try before were moved. What if they were lucky? 2,000 tribal allied army set out. They stood face to face with the Tatar elite cavalry. There was only a distance of 1 li between the two sides. This was the time for the cavalry to display their greatest strength. Compared to the 2,000 tribal allied army cavalry, the 2,000 Tatar elite cavalry seemed to be more uniform and orderly. They were dressed in winter clothes, with their left hands holding scimitars and their right holding shields. Their faces were masked, and their heads were covered with black headscarves, revealing only their eyes. They also wore long black cloaks and wore riding boots with daggers attached to them. They all carried large bows on their backs. Just by looking at them, they gave off an extremely fierce feeling. 4,000 people looked at each other. 8,000 eyes looked at each other. With a loud shout, both sides launched their most powerful charge. 4,000 cavalry warriors clashed in the blink of an eye. Then came the clash between the scimitar and the scimitar, the clash between the scimitar and the shield, the friction between the scimitar and the air, and the cutting of flesh and blood. The men borrowed the power of the horse, and the scimitar borrowed the power of the wind. Raising the scimitar, descending, chopping, dodging, or falling off the horse. The cruel side of the battle was constantly displayed on the battlefield. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. This was destined to be a bloody battle that would be written into history. Ding ding dang dang, this battle lasted for an hour. Following that, more and more cavalrymen from the northern desert tribes fled. The number of people on the battlefield was constantly decreasing. After another hour, the battlefield became quiet again. The elite Tatar cavalry had won. The Mongolian coalition army of the Gobi Desert sent out 2,000 men, but about 500 men escaped. Among them, the best one killed 2 men, but because there was no one by his side and he was in danger of being surrounded by several elite riders, he had no choice but to retreat. Not a single qualified soldier was selected in the first battle. This was a heavy blow to the morale of the entire mercenary army. On the other hand, the Tatar elite cavalry had killed 1,500 enemies and only lost less than 50 riders. This kind of 1:30 casualty ratio made the soldiers cheer unceasingly, their morale greatly boosted. Treat the injured warriors and arrange for the second batch of soldiers to take over. Yang Qindong sat on a large chair, surrounded by his black knights. Seeing the complete defeat of the first battle, he did not show the slightest anger or disappointment. Everything was within his expectations. If there was anything unexpected, it would be that the performance of the elite Tatar cavalry was stronger than he expected. However, this was even better. Since he wanted to create the first cavalry division and create the strongest cavalry in the world, the sharper the whetstone, the better. After the order was given, the second batch of 2,000 cavalrymen charged out. Although the failure of the first battle was a severe blow to their morale, they also learned some experience at the same time. For example, if they found that there were too many retreating cavalrymen, there was no need for the rest of them to fight hard. Otherwise, they would only be surrounded by the cavalrymen, and there was no other choice but to die. After the first experience, the second batch of soldiers charged out closer. They tried their best to be under the protection of their comrades. This way, they could face the enemy without worrying about being attacked from the front and back. After the first experience, Tua Buhua did not send any generals to lead the troops. Against these average Mongolian cavalrymen, there was no need to send any generals. They could also heavily injure the enemy. In the first battle, they had killed 1,500 enemies. If this continued, it would not be long before the enemy ran out of soldiers to send. Thinking about that, Tua Buhua had an urge to laugh out loud. Heaven Khan, do you think that I am afraid of you just because you outnumber me? Then I will let you see how wrong your decision is. The second battle began. Compared to the first battle, it was much more intense. It was obvious that everyone had used all their strength and did not hold back. This was a real battle, a bloody battle. It was either you die or I die. Any carelessness could lead to irreparable consequences. Everyone only had one life. If anyone did not use all their strength, they would be facing death. The battle continued for an hour. During this time, hundreds of Alliance army cavalrymen had retreated. Perhaps they felt that they were not strong enough and that if they continued to fight, they would only die. Or perhaps they were injured and could not fight anymore. Either way, the situation on the battlefield was worrying. On the entire battlefield, there were less than 300 Alliance army cavalrymen. Looking at the Tatar elite cavalry, only a few dozen had died. There were not many casualties. Kill, continue to kill. I still need one more person to join the army. In the battle, a very young Mongol cavalryman was still waving his blade. He blocked left and right and solved another crisis. His name was Hu Helu. He was a young man from a small Mongol tribe. Like most Mongols, Hu Helu grew up on horseback, and this allowed him to train his skills on horseback quite well. However, his best skill was still the knife-cutting technique. It was said that it was taught by a veteran soldier who passed by their tribe to recuperate. In order to learn this skill, Hu Helu secretly killed a fat sheep in his family and gave it to the other party. Then, when the other party left, his horse skills had improved greatly. This time, he had signed up for the battlefield because he wanted to bring the book with him. When Hu Helu was shopping in the first city, he accidentally saw the performance of the female soldiers of the first city's publicity team. The young him was quickly attracted by those beautiful girls. As a result, he had the first dream in his life, which was to marry a female soldier of the publicity team. This seemed to be a very honorable thing. Hu Helu was considered handsome, which was also where his confidence came from. However, when he inquired about the female soldiers of the propaganda team, he discovered a fatal problem. There was a prerequisite for these female soldiers to choose a husband, and that was that the other party had to be of Han nationality. Only then could their status be considered equal. When he heard this, Hu Helu was naturally very unhappy. Compared to the Han people, he was not inferior. He was willing to work hard and was good-looking. He could rely on his own two hands to obtain a happy and wealthy living environment. Of course, although he was angry, Hu Helu had to admit that at least in the first city, the status of the Han people was extremely high. It was far from what a person from a small tribe like him could compare to. Therefore, from then on, he had an idea in his heart, which was to find a way to become a Han person and become a member of this powerful nation. At that time, he would definitely marry the most beautiful female soldier and fulfill his dream. However, how difficult was it to choose a new nationality? He had never heard of such a precedent. Until last night, there was suddenly a piece of news that as long as one could kill 3 enemies on the battlefield, he could choose to become a Han person. If one could kill 4 enemies, he could bring one more person to become a Han person. A great thing fell from the sky. Hu Helu felt that the blood in his body seemed to be burning at this moment. He knew that the long-awaited opportunity had come, so he had to seize it. The realization of one's dream always needed to be fought. The opportunity was right in front of him, and Hu Helu did not want to let it go. Facing the powerful elite Tatar cavalry, he used all his skills. Not long after the battle started, he took advantage of the chaos and chopped off the head of an enemy cavalry. Then, in the middle of the battlefield, he stabbed his saber into the chest of an enemy. After killing 2 people in a row, the target was right in front of him. Hu Helu saw hope. However, the surrounding environment also became vile. He still had about 300 companions around him, and some of them were constantly retreating. The number of enemies was increasing more and more. Wanting to kill one enemy in this kind of environment was easier said than done. Right now, Hu Helu could choose to immediately retreat. This way, he could protect his own safety. After all, the mercenary camp was half a li behind him. As long as he retreated there, the Tatar cavalry would not dare to pursue him. There were more than 3,000 muskets of the ferocious Tiger Regiment placed there. They could take his life at any time. But if he did that, his dream would be shattered. This was something he could not accept. Therefore, he only had one choice left, and that was to continue killing the enemy. Even if he only killed one person, he would be able to become a Han person. Everything in the future would become bright. It was too late to say, but all these thoughts were formed in an instant. At this moment, Hu Helu's eyes revealed a wolf-like light. At this moment, he was determined to kill one more enemy. It was also at this time that 2 elite Tatar cavalry appeared in his field of vision. They discovered him and rushed towards him. Looking around, Hu Helu did not see any other enemy cavalry within 3 zhang of him. He knew that this was his chance. Even though there were 2 riders approaching, he was still fearless and charged head-on. Borrowing the momentum of the horse, Hu Helu's feet left the stirrups. A bold idea quickly formed in his mind. If he wanted to avoid the enemy's saber, then he had to abandon his horse. Otherwise, even if he could kill the enemy, he would be killed by the enemy. Chapter 890. On the battlefield, leaving one's horse was a very dangerous thing to do. If he didn't handle it well, he wouldn't know where the blade would come from and end his life. But at this time, in order to fulfill his dream, he couldn't care less. The 2 enemy riders were getting closer and closer. Hu Helu could already see the murderous eyes behind the black cloth. But at this time, Hu Helu suddenly jumped into the air. Then he turned around and slashed at the back of the head of the unprepared elite Tatar rider. The pincer attack of the 2 elite Tatar riders was blocked because of Hu Helu's sudden jump. Not only that, but the back of the head of one of the elite Tatar riders was cut. The sharp blade fell and half of the head was chopped off. Blood flowed out and the elite Tatar rider fell from his horse. Half of his head fell to the ground. He couldn't be more dead. Finally, he killed another person. Hu Helu had completed the mission of killing 3 enemies. Naturally, he was extremely excited in his heart. However, before he could cheer, he had already fallen from midair. Unfortunately, he sprained his ankle, and a heart-wrenching pain drilled into his body from his ankle. With his foot sprained, he could no longer stand. At this time, the elite Tatar riders on the other side had already moved their horses and rushed towards him. On one side was a person who borrowed the momentum of the horse to rush forward. On the other side was an injured soldier who was half kneeling on the ground. The result was self-evident. This scene also deeply attracted the attention of the scouts who were observing the battlefield. They were ordered by Yang Qindong to observe the results of the battle. In order to be able to see everything more clearly, they didn't want to lose any military merit. Hundreds of people had binoculars. Just now, Hu Helu's performance was seen by several people. Seeing that the first warrior who killed 3 enemies had finally appeared, they didn't have time to cheer. Seeing that this person was about to be in danger, everyone held their breath and held their breath. Ah! Half kneeling on the ground, Hu Helu saw the killing move in front of him. He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he suddenly dashed forward and rushed under the warhorse of the elite Tatar cavalry. He then brandished his saber and chopped off the rear hooves of the warhorse. The warhorse that was galloping at high speed also fell to the ground with a plop. The elite Tatar cavalry also fell to the ground together with it. It was a very disgraceful scene of a dog eating feces. After chopping off the warhorse's hind leg, Hu Helu did not stop there. Instead, he turned around and crawled forward. In less than 2 breaths, he arrived behind the Tatar elite cavalry that was in a state of confusion. Then, he abruptly plunged his saber down and ended the life of another enemy. After killing 4 people in a row, not only would he be promoted, but he would also be able to bring a family member with him. The excited Hu Helu seemed to have regained some strength in his body. He placed his left hand beside his mouth and whistled sharply. The horse in the distance heard the sound and came over. He then jumped onto the horse and turned around to head back to the mercenary base camp. Catch him! Seeing that someone had killed 2 of their companions, the 4 elite Tatar riders showed anger and rushed over. They would never allow such a warrior to escape. It was an insult to them. Shoot! As for Hu Helu, he endured the pain coming from his foot and tried his best to rush back. Finally, he was 300 meters away from the mercenary camp. 4 gunshots rang out and hit the feet of the 4 elite Tatar cavalry who wanted to rush over. The 4 gunshots caused the horses to neigh and also caused the 4 elite Tatar riders to curse. But in the face of thousands of black muzzles, they didn't dare to cross the line. They cursed all the way back. Hu Hela rushed out of the King of Hell's palace. A few scouts immediately came forward to lead the horses. The medics who had been waiting for a long time also came forward to check the injuries. Another scout in charge of registration ran to Yang Chendong and saluted. "Sixth young master, this person killed 4 enemies and returned safely." "Oh." In the midst of the silence, cheers suddenly rang out. Finally, someone had passed the test. While everyone was celebrating for him, they were also cheering for themselves. Since one person could do it, there would be a second person who could do it. Good. Yang Chendong patted the back of the chair and stood up. When he noticed that everyone's eyes were focused on him, he took the information in his hand and looked at it. He then announced loudly, "Hu Helu killed 4 elite Tatar riders on the battlefield. His military service is outstanding and he is the first soldier of the 1st Cavalry Division. He will be promoted and from now on, he is a member of the Han. At the same time, he has the right to promote a family member. Everyone, congratulate him." After speaking, Yang Chendong took the lead and clapped his hands. The applause immediately became continuous. Many excited Mongol soldiers from the Gobi Desert shouted, "Long live the Heavenly Khan, long live the Heavenly Khan." Suddenly, the cheers came one after another. Hu Helu, who was supported to stand up, also had tears of excitement in his eyes. He finally achieved his dream. At this moment, he felt that his feet didn't hurt anymore. When the cheers came out, it attracted the attention of the Tatar army. They didn't understand. The other side lost again. What was there to cheer about? Could it be that more of them had escaped from this battle? Looking at the battle report, killing 1,300 enemies and losing 54 cavalry, Tua shook his head. Then he said with certainty, "While there is still time, continue to send people to fight. This Khan wants to see how long they can last." The third battle soon began. Compared to the previous battle, the Mongol soldiers from the Gobi Desert were sent out this time. However, their morale was much higher. This battle lasted until dusk. And in this battle, there were 2 more brave warriors who managed to kill 3 enemies. Yang Chendong also promoted them in front of everyone and announced that they would join the world's 1st Cavalry Division that would be established soon, becoming glorious warriors. 3 battles in a day. The first battle took 4 hours. The second battle took slightly more than 4 hours. The third battle took almost 4 hours. They killed more than 100 enemies and lost more than 3,000 men. Just from this point alone, the mercenaries were the ones who lost. However, for some reason, the mercenaries' morale didn't drop. Instead, it rose. Other than those who had lost the battle and were seriously injured, the others were filled with energy. They wanted to perform well on the battlefield. In the headquarters of the new division, Commander Tiger, Main and Deputy Commander Shibi had just finished patrolling the troops and made arrangements for the night watch. They went back to their tent to wash their faces and prepare to sleep. After wiping his face with a towel, Commander Tiger, Main couldn't help but sigh. He said, "Today's losses are quite big." Hee. Shibi, who was at the side, chuckled. "What are you laughing at?" Shibi's laughter made Tiger, Main feel a little confused. "Nothing. I just want to ask Commander if you are worried that we can't bear the losses. Also, when it's our new army's turn, will we suffer the same loss?" "That's right. Is this not worth worrying about? You saw it today. The elite Tatar cavalry is indeed fierce. They are very good at horse riding and their individual qualities are also very high. They also know how to cooperate in battle. To be honest, if the same number of troops were to fight them head-on, I'm afraid that other than the heavy cavalry regiment, no other troops would have an advantage. Shouldn't this be worrying?" Facing Tiger, Main's question, Shibi nodded with a serious expression. But then he shook his head. "Commander, don't worry. Although the elite Tatar cavalry is strong, the soldiers of our new division are not to be trifled with. If we really fight, We won't be at a disadvantage by relying on our arrow point formation and the 3x3 formation. Besides, the 6th young master isn't worried. What do we have to worry about? From a certain point of view, this is indeed a way to improve our fighting strength. As long as they are not killed, even if they escape, they will gain a lot of fighting experience. Besides, didn't the 6th young master say that during the meeting at night? Those who escape will be given a chance. As long as they have the courage, they will have the chance to fight again in the future. That way, the morale will not drop and the army will be easy to control. There is nothing to worry about. Tiger Mane understood what Shibi said. But what he didn't understand was why they had to fight with the most barbaric and primitive cold weapons when they clearly had guns and cannons. By doing so, they would inevitably lose some strength. Was it really worth it just to train the soldiers? Considering that the 6th young master had said more than once that Shibi was very smart, and most importantly, he could see the big picture. She could learn a lot by staying with him. Tiger Mane leaned in front of Shibi. Deputy Commander, have you already seen through the mystery? Come, tell me. Looking at Tiger Mane's eager eyes, Shibi didn't dare to hide anything. He nodded and said, well, since Commander wants to know, then I will tell you. It's just a casual remark. If I'm wrong, please don't blame me. No, it's just the two of us here. Just treat it as a casual conversation and say whatever comes to mind. Tiger Mane waved his hand and sat down opposite Shibi with a smile. He even took the initiative to pour a cup of hot tea for Shibi. Shibi quickly got up and took the teacup. Then, he gently put it down. After organizing his words, he said, Commander, the 6th young master has talked more than once about the art of elite soldiers. In fact, I think it is very necessary. Think about it, if there are too many troops, it might seem very powerful, but the cost is also very high. Especially when we mercenaries are treated so well, the amount of money we need to spend every day is a large amount. Only the 6th young master has such strong financial resources. If it were other people, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to last a day. Chapter 891. Yes, it's true that we mercenaries can fight, and our morale is the strongest. However, when it comes to treatment, I can't deny that. Tiger's Mane nodded. This was also why he admired Yang Chendong. With money, he would not forget to give his brothers as much benefits as possible. This way, everyone would work harder in battle. This would form a virtuous cycle. Seeing Tiger's Mane nod in agreement, he continued, however, it takes money to feed the army. Even if the 6th young master is rich now, once the scale of the army expands to a certain extent, the pressure will not be small. At this time, the combat power of the army will become the key. How to maintain the combat power of the army without increasing the number of people in the army will become a problem that the leaders have to consider. Yes, go on. Tiger's Mane nodded. He agreed with this point of view. That's why we have this practical training. Think about it, we chose the strongest elite Tatar cavalry this time. If we can even pass their test, then our current army will be a powerful one. Of course, there will definitely be casualties in the process. The 6th young master has already made arrangements for this. Now, there are more than 40,000 people in the logistics division. The mercenaries captured more than 20,000 enemies in the Battle of Saihan Mountain. They will be our powerful backing. Once the new army suffers too many casualties, they will come in handy. Those people are reserve soldiers. Their treatment is not as good as the official mercenaries. In order to improve their treatment, they will have to perform well. The soldiers will figure this out themselves. We don't even need to do any work. We just need to watch everything from the sidelines and wait for the 6th young master to create an elite army for us. We can just pick up the ready-made ones. Not to mention, after this battle, it is equivalent to integrating the forces of the Mongolian tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert. Think about it, those who died today are those people. However, no one forced them. Not only that, those small leaders also took the initiative to ask for battle. They were afraid that the sixth young master would not give them a chance. After this battle, what will happen? She smiled and looked at Tiger's Mane. When Tiger's Mane was asked this question, various results flashed through his mind. In the end, he said with certainty, in the end, either the real warriors among these people will join the 1st Cavalry Division, or they will be dead or injured and will not be a threat to us. Yes, that's the result. Without a single blade or spear, with the benefits of good treatment and promotion, the combat power of the Gobi Desert's Mongolian army was destroyed. From now on, the 6th young master will live up to his name. Khan. Commander. Yes. When Tiger's Mane heard this analysis, he excitedly reached out his hand and slammed the table. He then looked at Shibi and said, "No wonder the young master asked me to talk to you more when I'm free. He said that you have a good view of the overall situation." It is true. Deputy Commander, if you see anything in the future, you can teach me. I will work hard to learn from you. You are too serious, Commander. We can learn from each other. Shibi hurriedly said politely. He would not forget the identity of the person in front of him. Even if he did not know anything and did things very ordinary, with his background as the servant of the 6th young master, he would have a bright future. As smart as Shibi was, he quickly saw through Yang Chendong's intention. Among the small leaders of the Mongolian tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert, there were some smart people. When they calmed down in the middle of the night, they also saw the problem. But what made them helpless was that the current situation was not something they could change. The temptation of becoming the 1st Cavalry Division was too great. Even if they wanted to lead the troops away now, they were afraid that none of their brothers would listen to them. Not only would their brothers not agree, but they also wanted to perform well and fight for a future. Speaking of which, they were the small leaders of the tribes, but they were only the leaders of a few hundred or 1,000 people. They were young and had some ability now, so the people in the tribe would listen to them. But what about the day when they grew old? Or what about the day when he was targeted and lost the battle and lost his power? It was hard to say whether they could secure the position of a tribe leader. In contrast, the position of a mercenary was really stable. They had specific and detailed rules. Even if you were old or injured on the battlefield and could no longer fight, you could still enjoy some good treatment. It was impossible to become a king or a tyrant with this, but it was not a problem for you to be content with being a wealthy citizen. Even these small leaders couldn't resist the temptation, let alone the ordinary cavalrymen. Most of them were young, driven, and had dreams. In the past, there was no platform for them to perform. Now that there was a platform for them to perform, who would not work hard and do their best? That night, many people were too excited to sleep. The next morning, after breakfast, the battle began again. Compared to yesterday, the Mongolian soldiers of Mo Bay performed better. Not only did they die less, but they also killed more enemies. In one day, they fought 3 battles. Compared to yesterday, only 3 people passed. Today, there were 23 people who passed the test. Among them, 4 of them killed 4 enemies and retreated safely. One by one, Yang Chendong sent the orders to the soldiers who were about to become the world's #1 cavalry division. This scene greatly stimulated everyone. Even the Mongol soldiers who had retreated from the battlefield requested to fight again, wanting to give it their all. Yang Chendong agreed to these people's requests. But he still decided to let everyone go through the first round before thinking about the second round. Otherwise, if all the training was used on the Mongolian soldiers of Mo Bay, the new soldiers would complain and say it was unfair. The battle continued. Unexpectedly, it lasted for a month. During that time, there were 2 heavy rains and 4 or 5 drizzles. But it did not stop the battle from continuing. At this moment, both the mercenaries and the Tatar army seemed to be exhausted. No one wanted to retreat. Everyone wanted to see who would be the first to give up. Maybe then, the winner would appear. In a month's time, all the warriors who could fight had fought several times. Some of the elite Tatar cavalry had fought more than 7 or 8 times. Their number had increased from 30,000 to 10,000, and many of them were injured. As for the mercenaries, their losses were not small. 30,000 of their 50,000 soldiers were killed or injured. This was because Yuan Heping had set up a hospital near the battlefield to ensure that the injured soldiers could receive good treatment and recover quickly as long as their injuries were not too serious. Of course, after a month, the results were very significant. The prototype of the world's #1 cavalry division had been formed. More than 5,000 people had passed the assessment. The best performance was the Tatar division commander Su He and the old student Tian who had studied in the Yang family academy. The two of them had killed 9 enemies at once. This was a record that no one else could break. Su He could be considered a general. He used to be a member of the Tatar army. He was regarded as one of Agar Dorji's most trusted subordinates. After joining the mercenaries, his performance had been good. He was promoted from a commander to a division commander. He had killed his way through mountains of knives and seas of fire. His achievements were not surprising. Who was Tianhu? In the past, he was not a well-known figure. It was even said that he had only started to train his equestrian skills recently. It had not even been half a year, but he had created such a record. It was no wonder that people had a whole new level of respect for him. But no one knew that before entering the Yang family academy, Tianhu had the title of Double Blade King. He was the disciple of the previous generation's Double Blade King. His speed was very fast. No one knew where he put his second blade and when he would strike. It was not an exaggeration to say that he appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Yang Chendong had once carefully observed how Tianhu killed his enemies. The speed at which he struck with his saber was extremely fast. Often, when the two met, his opponent would not even have time to react before Tianhu had already retracted his saber. When he met someone who was difficult to deal with, Tianhu's second saber would strike at an even more tricky angle. It was precisely because of this speed and strangeness that he finally obtained the result of killing 9 people in one battle. Hence, Tianhu was also known as the Double Saber Tianhu. And this was not his limit. Once his equestrian skills reached a certain level, his ability would continue to improve. Other than these two, there were many other people who performed well. For example, the Tatar division's 1st Battalion commander, Temu. He killed 6 people in one battle. This tiger general, who had been subdued by Yang Chendong in Narcissus Town, had finally grown up. There was also Fan Yuhai's former confidant, Lu Duo, who had killed 6 elite Tatar cavalrymen in one battle. Lu Duo had followed Fan Yuhai for a long time and was even used as a trusted aide. In the decisive battle on the battlefield west of the Water Horse River, Fan Yuhai was defeated and captured alive. Because Lu Duo was a talent, Yang Chendong kept him alive. This person had once thought of avenging Fan Yuhai. But when he truly integrated into the mercenary camp and was guided by Yang Chendong several times, his mentality underwent a huge change. After seeing the difference between his former master and the one he was about to serve, his heroic spirit was stimulated. With such a wise master, he always felt that if he could not make a name for himself, then he would be letting down his good skills. He immediately signed up to join the battle against the elite Tatar cavalry. Chapter 892. No matter what, Lu Duo was a captive general, not even a surrendered general. Whether he had the qualifications or not was finally reported to Yang Chendong. What was unexpected was that the 6th young master did not even think about it and directly approved it. In his words, Lu Duo was not a bad person, but he was affected by Fan Yuhai, which delayed his future. This kind of talent was naturally welcomed in the mercenary army. When these words reached Lu Duo's ears, he first burst into tears. Then, he took off his old battle suit and changed into the new military uniform that Yang Chendong had sent someone to deliver. He was using this method to formally bid farewell to his past. After that, he joined the battle with enthusiasm and hot-bloodedness. Not bad, he relied on his extraordinary combat strength to obtain the achievement of killing 6 enemies, becoming one of the most outstanding people. Other than that, most of the time he killed 5 or 4 people, and most of the time he killed 3 people. The elite Tatar cavalry was indeed the elite Tatar cavalry. Their fighting strength was valiant, and their individual qualities were strong. Even in a chaotic battle, they could maintain a good formation. If it was a one-on-one battle, even 50 to 60,000 Mongol soldiers would not be their opponent. It was even possible that the result would be a great defeat. More than 5,000 elites had been completely picked out. The rest were either injured or not strong enough. In this kind of situation, it was difficult to pick out any more elites. When all the information was placed in front of Yang Qindong, he first took a deep breath, then slowly closed his eyes and leaned back on the chair. At the same time, his right finger gently tapped on the armrest of the chair. Seeing this, Yang Lu hurriedly retreated. Those who knew Yang Qindong knew that whenever he did this, it was when he was thinking about something important. In the main tent of the Tatar army, after a month, Tua Tuo's face was no longer as arrogant as before. The aura of disdain on his body was also restrained. Although he had won every single one of the 100 battles he had fought, the lack of military strength was finally showing. He wasn't like Yang Qindong, who had 20,000 allies from the Mongol tribes and didn't have a logistics division with 40,000 troops as backup. He only had 30,000 elite cavalry, and after a month of fighting, he was starting to show signs of exhaustion. The remaining 10,000 elite cavalry were no longer as valiant as before due to the continuous battles over the past few days. Most of them were injured and they could not even use 70% of their original strength. If this continued, it would not be long before they were completely annihilated. Although he did not want to admit it, it was the truth. It was not something that would not exist just because he did not want to admit it. Thinking about how he had come with great ambition and had lost so many soldiers, he looked coldly at Meng Ku and Hubo, and said, "You two, tell me, are we going to continue fighting? We can't. If we continue like this, we're going to lose everything. These mercenaries are just using us as whetstones to train their troops." Hubo, was waiting for Tuo's words to finish as she spoke with a tearful tone. At the start, they had not seen through the intentions of the mercenaries. They had only thought that if they continued like this, the mercenaries would not have enough manpower. Even if they had reinforcements, after losing so many battles, their morale would be at an all-time low. As such, it was time for them to retaliate. Once an army lost their morale, even if they had advanced weapons like guns and cannons, they would not be able to display their full strength. As such, not only would they be able to defeat the mercenaries, but they would also be able to use these weapons for themselves. If that was the case, the Tatar cavalry would be able to quickly regain their former glory. This was also the reason why they continued to play along with Yang Qindong even though they knew that such a battle wasn't suitable for the 30,000 elite cavalry who were used to charging with the whole army. However, later on, they discovered that some of the mercenaries were people that they had fought before, and these people would kill them whenever they had the chance. When the situation turned bad, they would retreat. Only then did they realize that these people were just using them as practice. In the later stages of the battle, they could even see some of the mercenaries holding swords and shields, and they looked quite decent. They were clearly imitating them. Reality proved that these people were not only doing this, but the results were also quite good. In the past, they could kill 1,500 enemies in a single battle. At the very least, they could kill 12-23 enemies. But now, they could only kill a few hundred enemies in a single battle. Sometimes, they could only kill 200 or 300 enemies. Then, they would turn around and retreat. However, they would have to pay the price of over 100 people. The enemy was constantly getting stronger, while they were exhausted and did not have enough soldiers to exchange. Their battle strength was decreasing. Under this situation, they no longer had the upper hand. If they continued to fight, it would not be long before they would be the ones running away. Hubo no longer wanted to fight, and instead advocated for a retreat. Even Menk, who had always been fond of fighting, did not say anything. However, he did not take the initiative to fight, which made his decision clear. Seeing that his two subordinates did not want to continue fighting, Tuachuo Buhua could only sigh and say, "Then let's retreat." Let's do it this way. Let everyone pack up. We'll retreat in the middle of the night. This Yang Chendong is too cunning. If he finds out that we're retreating, I don't know what he'll do. Hu Bo had fought with Yang Chendong more than once, so she had some understanding of him. After hearing these words, she immediately nodded. Yes, the Great Khan is right. This person is extremely cunning. Even if we want to retreat, we cannot let them see it. Actually, the main reason he had summoned the two generals was to discuss the matter of retreating. He had suddenly decided to retreat tonight so that the news would not spread and the mercenaries would not have time to prepare. The two generals walked out of the Great Khan's tent and gave the order to prepare for the retreat. In addition to the 10,000 ordinary cavalry that had not been used, there were 20,000 men. There were also many injured elite cavalry, so they had to make preparations before retreating, such as packing their belongings. As soon as they moved, Su Yunsheng, who had been in charge of monitoring them, immediately noticed this abnormality. As the head of Yang Chendong's reconnaissance group, Su Yunsheng was also a veteran. The sixth young master had once talked to him and asked if he was willing to become a division commander in the new army. This was a clear sign of concern. In the end, Su Yunsheng had refused. He liked being a scout, as it allowed him to observe the enemy at close range without being discovered. Sometimes, a piece of timely information was better than an entire army, and he enjoyed the feeling of being able to predict the enemy's movements. It was a pity that with the current scale of the Scout Corps, being promoted to a regiment was already the limit. If they wanted to be promoted to a division, it would take a long time. Fortunately, Su Yunsheng was willing to endure hardship. In order to complete his mission as a scout, he did not even participate in the selection for the 1st Cavalry Division. Not only him, but many of the corps members of the Scout Corps were also not allowed to participate. Of course, Su Yunsheng was not the only one who did this. In fact, Tiger's Mane and Shibi had already started work on this long ago, allowing the corps members of the 1st Army to remain in the army. After all, the 1st Cavalry Division had to be built, but the construction of the other armies could not be abandoned. Because he loved being a scout, Su Yunsheng chose to rest during the day. When everyone stopped fighting, he came out and took the initiative to go to the front lines. Relying on his excellent camouflage and the advanced night vision telescope in his hands, he came every night to observe the Tatar camp from a distance of a few hundred meters. Yang Chendong had once said that if this kind of war of attrition continued, the first to be unable to bear it would be Tua Tua. Therefore, keeping a close eye on them to prevent them from suddenly escaping became the most important task in Su Yunsheng's eyes these days. After waiting for a full month, this result had finally arrived. Seeing that the Tatar camp had become somewhat chaotic, and that some injured soldiers had even been carried out of the tents and sent to the carriages ahead of time, Su Yunsheng knew that the result that the 6th young master had long predicted had occurred. The enemy was preparing to retreat. Leaving behind the other scouts to continue observing the situation, Su Yunsheng turned around and rode back to the mercenaries' main tent. He reported the situation to Yang Chendong. After suddenly hearing Su Yunsheng's report, Yang Chendong immediately had his servant Yang Lu gather all the generals. The time for an all-out counterattack had arrived. After receiving the order, the generals quickly came to the main tent. Compared to a month ago, the number of officers that came this time was much less. First of all, the small leaders of the Mongol tribes had disappeared. They had either passed the test and joined the 1st Cavalry Division, or they had been sent back to their tribes with heavy injuries, or they had simply lost their lives on the battlefield. In short, after this battle, the military strength of the Mongol tribes had become extremely weak, and they were no longer a threat to the mercenaries. The generals came and stood in front of Yang Chendong in 2 cases. Orders were also issued from the mouth of the 6th young master. The scouts at the front lines have sent news that the Tatar army is preparing to escape. Finally, it is time for us to launch an all-out counterattack. I believe that everyone must have been holding back in their hearts, and now is the time for everyone to release and vent. Now, I order. The Ferocious Tiger Regiment, Heavy Cavalry Regiment and the 1st Cavalry Division will form a joint force and charge forward. We must break through the enemy's camp in one blow. The light cavalry regiment and the scouts regiment will follow closely to the left and right of the army, and protect the flanks while holding back the enemy. There are still 20,000 enemies left, and we must think of a way to destroy them. At the very least, we must destroy their main force. From now on, there will be no more Tatar tribes on the grasslands. Does everyone have the confidence? Yang Qindong looked at the generals and asked with a resolute expression. Chapter 893. Yes. All the generals straightened their chests, their eyes shining brightly. Very good. After this battle, we will be invincible in this region. I want to use this battle to fight for a few years of peace. Also, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division will be chosen through this battle. Su He, Tianhu, you two have to work hard. Yang Qindong's voice was loud and clear as he made the final mobilization before the battle. The meeting ended very quickly, and the officers returned to their respective units and began to assemble. The final attack against the Mongol Tatar tribe would be launched in 2 hours. Tua Buhua had just transported over 2,000 wounded soldiers out when a scout came to report that the mercenaries seemed to have made some movements. They were gathering their troops, and it seemed like they had already discovered their intentions. That's really fast. When Tua Buhua heard this, his face became very ugly. He knew that a final battle was unavoidable, but he did not expect it to happen at this time. It must be said that this loyal duke really knew how to pick a time. Give the order. 10,000 cavalry will stay behind to block the enemy. No matter what, they must hold on for 3 hours. When the sun rises, they can retreat. The other 8,000 cavalry will retreat with me. As long as we are here, the Tatar tribe will not fall. Tua Buhua immediately made a decision, and his determination to retreat did not waver. As long as he retreated this time, with the strength of his family, he would one day rise again. At that time, he would definitely take revenge for today's enmity. Although the 10,000 ordinary Tatar cavalry did not want to retreat, they did not have any other choice. The matter was temporarily settled like this. Those who should retreat retreated, and those who should prepare, prepared. It must be said that this arrangement was not wrong, but Tua Buhua had overestimated the 10,000 cavalry he had left behind. He had also underestimated the strength of the enemy. This time, Yang Qindong had sent out all the elite troops. Whether it was the ferocious Tiger Regiment, the Heavy Cavalry Regiment, or the newly formed 1st Cavalry Division, they all had extraordinary fighting strength. One cavalry could even be used as a few people. In the face of such a powerful force, not to mention 10,000 ordinary Tatar cavalry, even 10,000 elite Tatar cavalry would not be able to stop them. When the 3 main forces of the mercenaries appeared in front of the Tatar army, they were like a tornado. First, there was the sound of gunfire, riddling the formation of the Tatar cavalry with holes. Then, the Heavy Cavalry Regiment appeared. They used their 3-meter-long broadswords to sweep through the army, taking away the heads of many enemy cavalry. The last to appear was the world's 1st Cavalry Division. When the 1st Cavalry Division appeared, they fully demonstrated what it meant to be unstoppable and unstoppable. Wherever they passed, the only sounds that could be heard were the howls of the Tatar cavalry and the sounds of weapons being thrown to the ground in surrender. There was nothing to be done. After a month of grinding with the world's strongest cavalry, all the members here were the most elite cavalry. Their fighting strength was extraordinary, and their strength was terrifying. They were even stronger than the previous Tatar cavalry. How could these ordinary cavalry stop them? The 10,000 enemy cavalry that was supposed to resist for 6 hours and hold out until dawn did not even last for 2 hours. The Tatar cavalry was completely defeated. They were either killed in battle or taken captive. The 3 armies did not have the slightest intention of stopping for the kneeling Tatar cavalry. They continued to rush forward, leaving them for the new army to clean up the battlefield. What they needed to do was to catch up with Tua Buhua and leave his life on this grassland. When the news of the 10,000 cavalry being defeated reached the ears of Tua Buhua, who was retreating, he actually thought that he was hallucinating. In the past, he had won every time with 2,000 against 2,000. Now that he had sent 10,000 cavalry, how could they be defeated so quickly? Although ordinary cavalry could not compare to elite cavalry, even if there were 10,000 pigs, they would not be able to catch all of them in 2 hours. The situation was very dangerous. Once the mercenaries caught up to them, they would be no match for them with their low morale. It was not impossible for them to be completely wiped out. Tua Buhua's gaze fell on Hubo, and Monk. Great Khan, I'll stay behind. As for you guys, run as far as you can. If you really can't, don't care about the injured soldiers. Just leave them here to fend for themselves. I only hope that the Great Khan will be safe. There is still hope for our tribe. Hubo knew that there was no time and made the decision to die to stop the enemy. He had lost many battles in the past, but the Great Khan did not punish him. Just because of this, he would repay the Great Khan with his life. Tua Buhua was a person of great importance and knew that this was not the time to be pretentious. He reached out and patted Hubo's shoulder. Okay, you take care too. I'll leave you 5,000 elite cavalry. No matter what, you have to stop the enemy. Great Khan, 5,000 is too much. Just leave 2,000 for me. Hubo still wanted to decline. He was very clear that there were only 8,000 elite cavalry left. If he left 5,000 to himself, the Khan's forces would be too weak. If they encountered any danger, they would not even have the ability to protect themselves. No, 5,000 elite cavalry is not much at all. The enemy was able to break through a 10,000 cavalry formation so quickly. They must be very strong. If we leave too few people behind, we will not be able to stop them. Alright, it's settled then. Remember, hold on until daybreak and think of a way to survive. As long as you survive, we'll be able to meet again one day. Tuachuo Buhua pressed down on Hubo's shoulder and said in a low voice. Yes, Great Khan. Hubo nodded in the end. He knew that this was the most feasible plan. Following this, the 8,000 elite cavalry split into 2 groups. Tua Buhua listened to Hubo's suggestion and left 2,000 injured soldiers behind. He only brought 3,000 elite cavalry with him under the protection of General Monk. Hubo had a grim expression as he said to the other 5,000 elite cavalry, "It's time to show our loyalty to the Great Khan. No matter what, we have to hold on until dawn. We have to give the Great Khan and his injured comrades enough time to leave. Kill, kill, kill." The 5,000 elite cavalry seemed to know that this might be the last battle of their lives. They raised their scimitars and shields as they shouted. About a quarter of an hour later, the 3 main forces of the mercenaries appeared. Hubo didn't say anything and immediately charged forward. He knew how powerful the guns and cannons of the mercenaries were. If the 5,000 of them were to face these guns, they wouldn't be able to do anything. But if they were to charge into the enemy's camp, then the situation would be completely different. They would be able to restrict the enemy's movements. In truth, it was not that Xiao Feng's ferocious tiger regiment did not want to fire. It was just that the Windchaser regiment, Su He, and Tian who did not give them a chance to fire. They knew that this was the elite cavalry of the Tatar Empire. They wanted to win fair and square, and not rely on external forces. Just like that, an extremely intense battle began. Very quickly, the 2 sides began to fight. In the night, saber against saber, saber against saber, saber against shield, the sound of which rose and fell, lingering in one's ears. The soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division who had been through life and death situations were all elites. They were all soldiers who had killed at least 3 elite cavalrymen on the battlefield. Now that the enemy no longer had the advantage and was only fighting one-on-one, they had the advantage from the start of the battle. They slaughtered their opponents until they were thrown off their horses. This was a testament to their strength and the might of the 1st Cavalry Division. Su He and Tian who chose to charge forward continuously. One was brave and fierce, while the other was sharp with his scimitars. Wherever they went, one elite Tatar horseman after another was cut down from their horses as if they were chopping melons and vegetables. In one breath, they had killed at least 5 or 6 people. Su He and Tian who had unknowingly gathered together. After the two of them looked at each other, Su He opened his mouth and said, "These elite cavalrymen have good foundations. It would be a pity to kill them all. Why don't we have a competition to see who can capture more?" "Sure," Tianhu said, keeping his words to himself. In the past, when he was in the Yang Academy, he was a taciturn person. Unless he asked someone a question or someone asked him a question, he would not say a word. At some point, the news that the two generals had stopped killing and had started to compete to capture captives had spread. The first to stop attacking was the Fierce Tiger Regiment. They set up a defense around the battlefield to prevent the enemy from escaping. Then, they raised their torches to light up the area. They wanted to witness this historic moment. Next, the Heavy Cavalry Regiment also stopped attacking. They also raised their torches to light up the battlefield. They wanted to see who would become the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Only 5,000 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division remained. They had also been influenced by the two generals. They stopped killing and started to capture captives alive. After a round of fighting, only 2,000 of Hu Bo's 5,000 elite cavalrymen were left. They were already prepared to fight to the death, but when they saw that the other party had suddenly stopped and changed from a murderous aura to wanting to capture them, they were all infuriated. A soldier could be killed, but not humiliated. This kind of action was looking down on them, and completely infuriated them. Under the lead of Hu the 2,000 elite cavalrymen began to counterattack again and again. They were inferior, so what if they had a lot of blood? Facing the cavalry of the 1st Cavalry Division, who were even stronger than them, even though they attacked like crazy, the results were not good. Not only were they unable to do anything to their opponents, but they also expended their energy faster. In the end, most of them were captured. Only Hu and less than 20 cavalrymen were left. On the side of the mercenaries, only Su He and Tian who were left. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.